Good morning, Madam President and Senators. We are in the season of Advent, a time when we prepare for the second coming of our Lord. In this second week of Advent, the focus is on peace. We live in a time when we reflect on the coming of Christ as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. We anticipate that his coming will restore order to our world, and that strife, wars, and upheaval will be done away with, and peace shall reign on earth. Joel chapter 3 verse 10 states, "He shall judge between the nations, and shall decide disputes for many peoples, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they study war anymore." This season tends to be a time when our hearts are more tender, and we hope and dream for a better world. Each of you as senators and leaders must determine, how do you work for peace in your everyday life? Do you reflect by your words, actions, and interactions with others that you embrace peace, display nonviolence, love, and compassion for all? Peace is an internal quality that radiates from the inside of an individual to others. Peace requires each of us determining to really make the hard calls of being a person of God's peace, who will not be vindictive and retaliatory. A story is told of two Arab boys who were playing together when a firearm accidentally discharged and killed one of the boys. The surviving boy, out of fear, ran to the sheikh's tent, pleading for mercy because he feared that revenge would be taken upon him. The sheikh took mercy upon him and said, "I will protect you. Come into my tent." Moments later, an angry crowd gathered, asking for the life of the boy. It was only then that the sheikh discovered that the boy killed was his only son. He had just given his word to protect the boy's life. He stood there puzzled, angry, and uncertain. Then he quietly said, "I have given my word, which cannot be broken. The boy's life is to be spared, but I will take him in and raise him as my son." And he did that. Jimi Hendrix said, "When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace." 1 Thessalonians 5 and 15 says, "Make sure that nobody pays back wrong for wrong, but always strive to do what is good for each other and for everyone else." I want to encourage you, as we celebrate the Prince of Peace, that you as senators will examine the internal you. Are there persons who you are holding in who have hurt or said things about you that hurt? What are you going to do about it? Make a list of the persons that you need to forgive, and I challenge each of you to do it. Do you need to be reconciled to someone, or maybe there may be more than someone, a few people? Seek to sort it out before Christmas. Remember, when you do your part and others do not reciprocate, remember, strife and burdens and unforgiveness are too heavy a burden to bear. So let them go and let God deal with the rest. Isaiah 11, 6 and 9 says, "The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the lion and the fatted calf together, and a little child shall lead them. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be filled of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea." Let us pray. Dear God, you are the Prince of Peace. We present to you all the troubled spots of our Bahamas and our world. Help us to know that you do not require us to be vindictive, retaliatory persons who will operate from revenge and the get-you-back mode. Guide our senators to stand for right, justice, and fairness in all their undertakings. When they do wrong, help them to strive to make it right, and to seek for forgiveness when necessary. May they be your agents of peace wherever they go, and may they operate in the true reason of this season, that you came to transform the lives of all people and to restore us to a right relationship with you. We pray all these things in the precious name of your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Please join in the prayer of our Lord. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Good morning, Senators. Today is the 8th of December, 2022, morning session. Adoption of minutes.
Good morning, Madam President. I move that the minutes of the sessions of the Senate held on November 21st, 2022 and November 23rd, 2022 be adopted.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of November, 2022 and the 23rd of November, 2022 be adopted. As many as in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The minutes of the 21st of November, 2022 and the 23rd of November, 2022 are hereby adopted. Motions for leave of absence to resign. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign. Swearing in of new senators. Communications by the President. I firstly want to start this morning by thanking our able and beloved Senate Chaplain for a timely message on peace, and it's a very heart nudging and mind searching message, and I thank you so much for that timely message. Thank you, Madam Chaplain. The chair extends a happy and belated birthday greetings to Senator Ronald Doncom, who celebrated his birthday yesterday, December 7th, 2022. Happy belated birthday, Senator Doncom. I understand that there's cake and some stuff in the lunchroom for all of us. We appreciate your kindness. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Ronald Doncom. Senators, this morning, it is with much regret and sadness that the chair offers sincere condolences to Senator Randy Roll on the passing of his dear and precious mother, Karen Johnson, who passed away on Sunday, December 4th, 2022. Senator Roll, we know that losing a loved one is traumatic, as some of us walk this road, and we know that the pain it brings. We want you to know that we are here for you during this difficult time of loss that you are experiencing, and I'm sure that I speak for the entire Senate body. I'm sure that you'll be hearing for the rest of them throughout the day that we are very, very deeply saddened to learn of the loss of your mother. Our thoughts and our prayers are with you. And if there's anything that you need to do, please let us know. And I just want you, Senator Roll, as a personal note, to just remain focused on that blessed hope. And we all know that there's a glad reunion day when all of the sickness and sorrow will cease and we'll live together forever and forever. So until such time, be comforted and be encouraged and keep the faith. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the House of Assembly.
Message from the House of Assembly.
Bahamas, number 21, message to the Honorable the President and honorable members of the Senate from the Speaker and the representatives of the Honorable House of Assembly. The House of Assembly acquaints the Honorable the Senate that they have passed the following bill and desire the consent of that Honorable Chamber, namely, a bill for an act to repeal the Mental Health Act and to make provision for the promotion, protection, and enforcement of the rights of persons diagnosed or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness, to care and treatment of such persons, the establishment of a mental health services board, the establishment of a mental health review tribunal, and for connected purposes. House of Assembly, Nassau, 23rd November 2022, Patricia DeVoe, Speaker. Bahamas, number 22. Message to the Honorable the President and honorable members of the Senate from the Speaker and representatives of the Honorable House of Assembly. The Honorable House of Assembly acquaints the Honorable the Senate that they have passed the following bill and desire the consent of that Honorable Chamber, namely, a bill for an act to provide for a more effective and comprehensive disaster risk management policy and framework through the establishment of the Disaster Risk Management Authority and for connected matters. House of Assembly, Nassau, the 7th of December 2022, Patricia DeVoe, Speaker.
Laying of documents by the ministers.
Madam President, I beg leave to lay on the table of the Senate the following orders. The Industries Encouragement Approved Product Pieces of 8 Winery Limited Order 2022 and the Industries Encouragement Approved Manufacturer Pieces of 8 Winery Limited Order 2022.
Order the documents be brought up. Order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I beg leave to lay on the table of the Senate the following copies of the following regulations. Price Control Application to Additional Items Number 2 Regulations 2022 and the Price Control General Amendment Number 16 Regulations 2022.
Order the documents be brought up. Order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
There are none, Madam President.
Communications by ministers. Communications by senators. Questions. Answers to questions. Presentations of petitions. Appointment of select committees. Reports of committees. First reading of bills. Second reading and committal of bills. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michael Alcides.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, before I begin, I would like to associate myself with the comments that you made in conveying condolences to our colleague, Senator Randy Roll, on the passing of his dear mother this past Sunday, and to just assure him of our prayers and support and our commitment to lift him up during this time of bereavement. Madam President, I rise to move for second reading and committal of a bill for an act to repeal the Mental Health Act and to make provision for the promotion, protection, and enforcement of rights of persons diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness, the care and treatment of such persons, the establishment of a mental health services board, the establishment of a mental health review tribunal, and for connected purposes. Madam President, this mental health bill seeks to replace the Mental Health Act of 1969. It is divided into 10 parts that is intended to regulate and govern the provision of mental health services and the care of individuals with mental health issues, and as well the diagnosis. And if we were to go straight to the application of the Act, Madam President, and I would read directly from the Act: the provisions of this Act shall have effect with respect to the diagnosis of persons exhibiting symptoms of a mental illness, the admission of persons diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of a mental illness, the care and treatment of persons diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of a mental illness, the making of decisions for and the management of the property of persons with a mental illness who lack capacity, the protection of the rights of persons with a mental illness from discrimination and for connected purposes. That is how this act would be applied. And I think I should as well, Madam President, read the objectives of the act, what we're seeking to do here today, which I think is very important. The objectives of the act are to protect the human rights and dignity of each person diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of a mental illness, whether assessed for mental health care and treatment or not, in accordance with the purpose and principles of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Second objective is to ensure that each person who is diagnosed with or exhibiting signs of a mental illness is assessed for care and treatment for mental illness, is informed of his rights under the Act. So to ensure that each person who is diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of a mental illness or is assessed for care and treatment for mental illness is informed of his rights under this Act. And we will go into the rights as we move on. The third objective is to remove discrimination against each person diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of a mental illness, and to facilitate the provision of comprehensive mental health care and treatment in each community throughout the Bahamas, to provide for the assessment, care, and treatment of mental illness in the least restrictive way, to enable and support each person diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of a mental illness to make or participate in decisions about his or her assessment, care and treatment and recovery, and to exercise his fundamental rights and freedoms, to provide oversight and safeguards in the examination and assessment of each person diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of a mental illness and the care and treatment of such person, to promote the continuous improvement in and provide a framework for the quality of mental health services, the delivery of mental health services, the safety of the delivery of mental health services, the facilities in which mental health services are delivered, and the application of all prescribed management protocols for persons exhibiting symptoms of or diagnosed with a mental illness, to promote the recovery of each person who has a mental illness, and to establish the tribunal and the medical care board. So, wide application and very laudable and expansive objectives, Madam President. And as I said, the bill is divided into 10 parts, dealing with the administration and promotion of mental health care services, rights and protection of persons with mental illness, capacity to make decisions and representation for persons with mental illness. And in particular, when we come to the capacity to make decisions, this bill, when speaking to the capacity for persons to make decisions, says every person who is not a child, as defined in this act, is deemed to have capacity to make decisions unless it is established that he lacks such capacity. And a person is not to be treated as unable to make decisions unless all practicable steps to assist him in making decisions have been taken without success, and merely because he makes an unwise decision. So you don't just say people that don't have capacity because you believe they've made an unwise decision. It speaks to the diagnosis, admission, care, and treatment of persons with mental illness, the care and treatment of persons with mental illness in custody or convicted interstate, powers of the court, the establishment of the Mental Health Care Services Board, Mental Health Care Review Tribunal, and miscellaneous provisions dealing with loitering in a public place, improper detention of a person, general penalties, and the ability for regulations to be promulgated under the Act. Madam President, the World Health Organization defines mental health as a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. And so, put simply, Madam President, anything outside of this definition can be considered a state of mental unwellness on a wide spectrum of conditions, from minor to major. The World Health Organization estimates that mental illness will affect 1 in 4 people in their lifetime. And it is estimated that more than 1/3 of the financial resources expended on non-communicable diseases over the next 20 years will be allocated to mental illness, which is a common comorbidity of other non-communicable diseases. So people are coping with other conditions, it affects their mental health as well. And so, Madam President, our Ministry of Health, our Public Hospitals Authority, and the National Health Authority recognize the benefit of an integrated healthcare model in delivery of healthcare services across the country, because, as I said, other conditions contribute to a deterioration in mental health. And that is why, Madam President, it is important that this bill makes provision for the establishment of a mental health care board from a wide spectrum of society. And so the 11-member board that will be provided for in this act will oversee the planning and management of mental health care and treatment in the Bahamas. They will promote mental health best practices, review care and treatment techniques, even the use of experimental techniques, and set standards for accredited facilities, or facilities to be accredited. And included on the board will be a person who has accessed mental health services, a patient, former patient, a family member or caregiver of a person suffering from mental illness, members of civil society, a representative from social services, the chairman of the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities, and other health and mental health professionals will be represented on the board. And they will be able to provide advice and counsel to the Minister of Health, which will help facilitate the creation and development of policies and programs that promote mental health care and wellness throughout the country. It gives, Madam President, a wide spectrum of our community with experience either in providing mental health care services or individuals who have been the recipient of healthcare services or somehow contact with the system as well as social services, to be able to sit down and help the government to develop policies as it relates to the delivery of mental health care. Part 4 of the bill, Madam President, speaks to the rights of persons with mental illness. Part 5 of the bill addresses care and treatment of mental illness, inclusive of psychological services. This bill provides a space for persons who are exhibiting signs of mental unwellness to have voluntary admission to a health or mental health facility for assessment. It also allows persons to take a proactive role in their mental health and designate a representative or enact an advance directive to aid in the proper facilitation of care and treatment. Part 12 of the bill establishes the composition, jurisdiction, and proceedings of the Mental Health Review Tribunal. And this five-member tribunal, Madam President, shall be appointed by the Governor General for 3 years and have the responsibility to hear and determine mental health matters. The review tribunal will be comprised of an experienced psychiatrist, mental health professional, counsel and attorney at law, administration or service or social service professional, and someone experienced in mental illness or relevant tribunal experience shall have their decisions, and they shall have their decisions enforced in the same manner as judgment in the Supreme Court. And this review tribunal offers another opportunity for persons with mental health matters to be objectively heard and not forgotten. The tribunal's focus is to protect the rights and worth of persons with mental illness through fair determinations and proceedings that lead to the best outcomes for these persons and, by extension, our community. Madam President, mental health stigma is real, and we must do all in our power to address it. The unfair labeling, disregard, and treatment of persons suffering from mental illness has been a thorn in the side of professionals and administrators as they seek equality in health care. This bill seeks to strip away the derogatory labels and discrimination that persons with a mental illness can be subjected to. You all know the jokes. It is our national responsibility, Madam President, to treat each other with care and dignity in our interactions with each other. In the healthcare industry, whether public or private, there's a prevailing duty to deliver compassionate, quality, and healing care in a health or mental health facility. And anyone who willfully mistreats or neglects persons under his or her care opens himself up to penalties as prescribed under this law that we are proposing. Penalties are clear as outlined in the bill, and we are adopting a zero policy tolerance for mistreatment or abuse of patients with mental illness. Madam President, as I said, this bill seeks to replace the Mental Health Act of 1969. And so after 53 years, we are here with this bill, not yet perfect, but as an administration, it is our responsibility to put in place the legal framework to support policies and programs that will advance us as a country in all areas, and in particular, what we're doing here today. And so this bill recognizes some imperfections and developments that have happened since those 53 years, during those 53 years in the diagnosis of and treatment of mental illness, and we are seeking to remedy what experience that those who were in place in 1969 did not have the benefit of the developments and the knowledge that have accumulated since 1969. Madam President, mental health is equally as important as physical health. And the people who suffer from mental illness deserve the same dignity, respect, support, and quality of treatment as those who suffer from other health issues. And so, Madam President, with those few words, I move for second reading and committal of the Mental Health Bill, the long title, A Bill for an Act to Repeal the Mental Health Act and to make provisions for the promotion, protection, and enforcement of the rights of persons diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness, the care and treatment of such persons, the establishment of a Mental Health Services Board, the establishment of a Mental Health Review Tribunal, and for connected purposes. I so move, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Halkitis, for your contribution. Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Randy Roll.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, Madam President and fellow colleagues. Before I begin my contribution this morning, my family and I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for your well wishes during this time of our bereavement. I also wish to apologize to everyone that I have not yet responded to. All your calls, your texts, voice notes, and visits are greatly appreciated. I rise this morning to second the Mental Health Bill 2022. Madam President, it is indeed timely, and I felt compelled to contribute to this topic. It is long overdue, and I wholeheartedly agree with its implementation. Madam President, in every society, there is a number of persons that are considered to be abnormal, especially in our society, and those people are often overlooked. The Davis administration is now enacting the Mental Health Bill to ensure that those suffering from any form of mental instability is taken care of without fear of losing their autonomy or dignity, and ensuring that reintegration into society is as seamless as possible. I came across a book authored by former footballer Tony Collins titled "Turn Your Messes into Messages." Madam President, this spoke to me on so many different levels, and it also applies to my message today. Mental health is fatigue. For instance, the loss of my mother, Madam President. She was my rock, my cheerleader, my foundation, and I am where I am today because of her. I was at her house the other day, sorting through her belongings, and I came across her Bible. In that Bible, there was a piece of paper resting on Psalm 91. The paper had my name on it. Not only was she my biggest supporter, she was my covering. I was floored, Madam President. I was so filled with grief, but I was also comforted in knowing that I had someone in my life that was there for me unconditionally, and now she's gone. There are others that I can lean on, but there is nothing like a mother's love. Through it all, there are people that expect men to be stonewall and emotionless. We are not expected to hurt or be vulnerable or talk about our feelings. Despite the situation, Madam President, those unrealistic expectations do not and cannot build healthy relationships. The reality of it is that hurt people and become a vicious cycle. We can stop that generational curse by nurturing and fostering good mental health. Alan Rufus once said, "Your inner strength is your outer foundation." Well, Madam President, as you already know, on Sunday past, I lost my outer foundation. I am now challenged with the rigorous task of not letting my walls collapse. Madam President, God is a God of uneventful wonders. And He put people in my life that I am able to lean on. I may force all on my own, but there are moments when we all need that extra something. Over the last few days, I can certainly say that I know who is in my corner. my support system positively poured their will and strength into my spirit. For that, I will always be grateful. There are also a number of women that are not in the best space for a number of reasons. However, we all know that most women are stronger than us by far. Madam President, I don't know how they accomplish most of the things that they do. They are the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick makers. Superheroes. Some wear it proudly, like a badge of honor, and then there are some that are not as happy because those titles have forced them to have no other choice. It now becomes terminal, a life sentence. There's this woman that I know, and this is a true story, Madam President. She is brilliant. She has a beautiful mind. She is genuine and ultimately a lovely person. However, there were periods that she didn't seem quite herself. We all laughed off and attributed her shift in personality as her being too smart and that she had a lot going on. One day, when she shifted, that other personality seemed to dominate and remained, and the person that we all knew and loved seemed to be less present. Her outward appearance was the only thing that remained the same. See, my friend had suffered a loss. She also lost her mother unexpectedly, and as expected, she did not take it well. She started to ostracize herself from friends and family members. She would act out on social media, basically lashing out at anyone she felt did her a disservice. There was also an incident whereby she was found standing naked outside of her home. She said that all of her clothes were too small, and without it, she felt free. The downward spiral continued inwardly because her foundation was gone, and without a good foundation, your structure shifts and sometimes crumbles. Madam President, she was crumbling. We tried to assist her as best as possible, but she was too far gone. She has siblings, but they seemed to be against her. I got the sense that there might have been some bad blood between them. Finally, some of her family members stepped in and tried to help her, but they soon realized that she needed something that they were unable to give her. Their only option was to admit her to Sandilands. After her admission, we found out that our dear friend had previously been diagnosed with a treatable mental condition. Her mother used to ensure that she complied with taking her medicine. After her mother's demise, she stopped taking her medicine. Her support system was gone, and with no foundation, coupled with the fact that she was still grieving, she felt as if she didn't have anyone to talk to. Madam President, therapy is our friend and not a weakness. Choice stems from one's state of mind. As it stands, the team at Sandilands do their best that they can. However, without funding, available resources, adequate and qualified staffing, patients are often released without receiving the necessary treatment. For far too long, we have misused and misunderstood the term mental health in our country. The Mental Health Bill 2022 is designed to diagnose mental illness, provide easy access to industry professionals, and to humanly treat those that are not in the best headspace. Madam President, this is progress at its finest. Additionally, it may also be beneficial if the Rehabilitation Center name was to be changed from Sandilands Rehabilitation Center to Willingness Rehabilitation Center. Let me repeat it and I will explain why. It may also be beneficial if the Rehabilitation Center name was to be changed from Sandilands Rehabilitation Center to Willingness Rehabilitation Center, as the name Sandilands carries a negative connotation. I realize that we live in a society that gives almost everything a name. And guess what? That name often sticks. The same applies to buildings, places, and things. So whenever I heard the name Sandilands, I automatically saw it as a place where crazy people go. Because that's what I was told. I was a product of conditioning, generational conditioning. It was not a place where one would believe that they could go for help. From childhood to now, we all agree that when the name Sandilands is mentioned, most of us automatically associate it with crazy people. And we say it just like that. Crazy people, mentally ill people, without remorse or empathy. The stigma is daunting. Would you honestly run to a place known as the Crazy Hill for help? Madam President, this bill is definitely a step in the right direction. The Constitution speaks to the provisions of a comprehensive health care community and protection of human rights, as well as care and attention and promotion of mental health services. It also aims to remove discrimination and exploitation against our countrymen that are either diagnosed with mental illness and those that are displaying symptoms of a mental illness. With this act, the Davis administration is committed to it in writing and might add to improving and providing safeguards with the mental health services so that those might not be the best mental space, so that those who are not in the best mental space would have their very own support system and receive the best treatment and therapeutic outcomes. Madam President, humanity plays a huge role in our mental well-being. The Mental Health Bill 2022 will give so many an opportunity to be a part of something that will benefit them in a way that they were often excluded from. As stated earlier, when I referenced Tony Collins' book, Turning Messes into Messages, I chose to turn my mess, my loss, into an example, into a message for others. As simple as it seems, that kind word, that listening ear, a support system, a good Samaritan gesture might be what someone needs to stabilize their foundation. Madam President, with these few words, I second the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Randy Roll, for having the courage to deliver such an excellent presentation, considering the circumstances. May God continue to hold you in the palm of his hands, Senator Roll. It has been moved and second that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to repeal the Mental Health Act and to make provision for the promotion, protection, and enforcement of the rights of persons diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness, the care and treatment of such persons, the establishment of a mental health services board, the establishment of a mental health review tribunal, and for connected purposes. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Henfield.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning. I found the words of the chaplain most moving, despite the notion that a chaplain would quote Jimi Hendrix. But I found them so moving, I wrote them down, Madam President. When the love of peace overpowers the love of power, we'll have peace. I think that's a wonderful way to begin the Advent season. I also want to begin by joining you, Madam President, in extending to our colleague, Senator Rule, profound condolences on the passing of his mom, and to agree with him that most people think men ought not cry. I think that's a fallacy that we have to set aside, and these communities where we find this kind of machoism. I lost my mom about 5 years ago, and I can tell you I still cry for her. And so I don't suspect you're going to stop crying anytime soon. But as I said to you when we spoke earlier this week, you will find peace in the Lord when all have left you and gone their various ways and mourn with you. You'll find that peace that can only come from above. And please be assured of my continued prayers and support for you and your family, my brother. I'd also like to extend condolences to the family of Alfonso Boogaloo Elliott, a fine Bahamian entrepreneur and a good friend of our party, an MCM of the Free National Movement. Extend condolences to his family upon his passing. I'd also like to take this opportunity, Madam President, to congratulate the debate team from Patrick J. Bethel High School in Central Abaco, which recently won a tourism debate, which was a regional debate. I was honored to have been invited whilst in Abaco to come and chat with them before, just ahead of the debate, and I'd like to think that the chat made some sense, as they made us all very proud. And I think the future of the Bahamas is in very good hands. I'd like to call their names, if I may: Ocean Fox, Dinero Sanfa, and Tiana Boodle, and say to you that each of you made us all in Abaco very, very proud. Continue to keep up the good work. And we also congratulate your coach and teacher, Mrs. Ruby Strawn Roll. Thank you. Madam President, I support this bill, as it is somewhat personal to me, as you will hear later in my presentation. But I'd also like to commend Senator Rule for, I thought, a very adroit, coherent presentation on this very sensitive topic to each of us. Thank you very much. Madam President, I wish to begin by commending the Minister of Health, and by extension the government of the Bahamas, for the introduction of this bill, which seeks to make provision for the protection and enforcement of rights of persons diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of a mental health illness, and for the establishment of a mental health service board and mental health review tribunal. The aims of this bill that we will pass into law today are laudable and worthy of effort toward making life better as much as practicably possible for those suffering mental illness, and by extension, life in our wider communities. Madam President, in the 70th session of the United Nations General Assembly, mental health was recognized as being a part of the SDGs. And so it tells us how very important mental wellness is to the growth and development of countries the world over. And by so doing, they recognize the notion that mental health plays a key role in efforts to achieve social inclusion, and equity, and universal health coverage, access to justice, and human rights, and sustainable economic development, according to a 2011 WHO report. Madam President, nothing can be more debilitating and infuriating to a family than living with mental illness. I know because my family has suffered from this experience for the past nearly 30 years. My brother Carlos, we call him Cheeks, because as a youngster he was a very avid basketball player. He was a good point guard. And so those from my generation and maybe a little beyond will remember Maurice Cheeks. No one could stop him on a basketball court. He was that good. And as the story goes, he found himself in a place where he smoked what they call a laced joint, triggering a form of latent schizophrenia. That's a common story in the Bahamas, all too common. The doctors say that there's this latent schizophrenia in you, and you do something like smoke a marijuana joint. They say it's laced, but it could be just a marijuana joint as far as I'm concerned. And it triggers this schizophrenic reaction in you. The experts describe latent schizophrenia as a mental disorder that affects a person's ability to tell what is real and not real, to act upon. You know, this changed our lives tremendously. But this is my brother's reality. It's, as Senator Rule was describing, it puts one in a place where they cannot differentiate between what is real and what is not real. And in our experience, we found, perhaps as the case you spoke to found, he says to us, I don't like to take medicine because the medicine slows me down. And so here's this altered state of reality where we know when you take the medicine, it helps. But you refuse to take the medicine because it changes what you see as your reality. And so this is my brother's reality, and I suspect it's the reality of many families in this country. And that's why I so applaud the efforts of this particular bill. A UN report dated 17th of June 2022 suggests that nearly 1 billion people, 1 billion, worldwide suffer from a form of mental illness. We heard from the mover of this bill that there's also a report by the WHO which suggests that 1 in 4 persons will suffer from a form of mental illness. A staggering figure that is even more worrying if you consider that it includes around 1 in 17 ages. 1 in 17 ages. And so if we do the math, Madam President, and we look around this room, how many of us we have in here? You divide that by what, 4? And it's likely, right? Okay, if you believe these statistics, not to make light of it, if you believe these statistics. And you know, what is so worrying to me about mental illness, and of recent vintage, it's come to light all over the world, particularly as we see to our friends in the North, these school shootings, where kids will be at home with their parents and families and appear to be leading what some might consider normal lives, and for some reason or the other, they take a high-powered weapon or a few weapons and go into a school and determine to end the lives of little children. And we see this thing repeated all across the world and over. I heard President Biden indicating, I think on the news this morning, I heard him say that much more has to be done to prevent these things. And I think this is where the responsibility lies upon us in the community to, as we say in counterterrorism, if you see something, say something. There's nothing wrong for you to observe a loved one, perhaps even one of your own children, acting in a way untoward, and call to the attention of who it needs to be called to, that my child needs treatment. Or you do your best to get the kind of treatment before something untoward happens. According to the WHO, to make matters worse, in the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic, rates of common conditions such as depression and anxiety went up by more than 25%. Imagine the levels of depression and anxiety brought on by Senator Russell, brought on by Hurricane Dorian, which we lived through, to be exacerbated by the advent of the pandemic just 6 months later. So it's what you for Grand Bahama and Abaco, and I believe the level of anxiety and depression extended far beyond the shores of Abaco and Grand Bahama. I believe the whole country, the entire country, felt the anxiety that was being witnessed and felt on the ground in Abaco and Grand Bahama during the course of those 3 days of the passage of Hurricane Dorian. And that's why I still believe to this date, and I've said it in here before, that there has to be more of a concerted effort made by each of us to reach out to the kids in the schools. Some work was done. We had some NGOs that came in and they tried to help us. But you still hear stories on the ground at home that if the rain gets a little hard, the wind blows a little fierce, the youngsters become again anxious and timid, and adults as well. This raises tremendous concerns, as so many were forced to endure Dorian and the pandemic. Madam President, it's not my view that the government alone must find all of the answers to society's challenges. I don't believe that. I've sat at the executive level of the government, and it is impossible for any one government to find all the solutions to the problems which we face. That's why over the world you have NGOs, non-governmental organizations and groups that deal with some issues, like the animals that go unattended. We have our colleague here who treats with them. And I was so pleased to see a group in Abaco over the last couple of weeks trying to deal with the potcakes that are just not attended by their owners, or who just go and exponentially multiply all over the place because they're not spayed or neutered. Governments can't do it all. And anybody who tells you that they can, they're not being honest. They're not being honest. This is not my view. That said, Sandilands, which is recognized as our tertiary institution for the treatment and care of those afflicted with mental illness, must, Madam President, in my opinion, evolve beyond a simple place with revolving doors. Sandilands, or when we changed the name according to Senator Roll to the Wellness Center, must move beyond that persona of a place where our loved ones just go and are quickly treated and hurried along, so that physical space could be made available for someone else with a greater need in the moment. And I know all too well that many families will just like mine, sometimes think about leaving your loved ones in Sandilands. We had the issue with the boarders at the Princess Margaret Hospital, because the burden becomes a little heavy. You're doing all you can. You're trying your best. And this loved one will not seem to cooperate because they're not in a mental state of cooperation. And so you find yourself as a family in a catch-22, where the community looks at you kind of with jaundiced eyes because they're saying, here is this family not looking after loved ones. And we've seen that happen all too often, all across this country. And so Sandlands must, I believe, revolve to that place where there's not only room for treatment, but where we find a halfway house between Sandlands and the community, with maybe run by an NGO, if none exists already, maybe run by an NGO with governmental support that can have that space for the individual coming back into the community to go through a period of reintegration where they will be looked at by professionals. And we have wonderful professionals at Sandlands. Wonderful. I mean, they do humans effort and trying, and I don't know how they do it, but God has gifted them with the grace to do what they do. They do tremendous work. And they're very good at what they do. And they treat their patients with a sense of love and care and concern that I personally admire. In truth, we must resolve to fix our entire healthcare system in our society. That's my view. I know when the minister moved this bill in the other place, I sense a sense of compassion. Because I recall vividly, he indicated that one morning whilst driving to office, he saw someone on the road, unclothed, a human being, and it moved him, as it should move each and every one of us to do something about it. I read recently that the Ministry of Health will outsource patient care to Doctors Hospital at a cost of $2 to $2.5 million, mostly because the public health care system that we have don't have the capacity to facilitate the public patients. This is not a knock on the government. This is a knock on successive governments, of which I served as a part. We have to find a way, we have to find a commitment and resolve to make our healthcare system a place where you and I, leaders in this country, would have no issue with taking our children or taking ourselves. The Bahamian people deserve no less, and I'm very passionate about this. I know we have made tremendous strides over the years. We've made tremendous improvements over the years, but we got to go much further. I know the government's responsibility is to set its policies, but listen, man, I would build a first world-class hospital before I build a sports center. That's just me. That's just me. Because some people have no other choice. They have nowhere else to go except to come to our public healthcare facilities. And this is all of us. And this is one of the things that I think the opposition to the government, whilst we sit opposite to each other, must come together and agree on. That if you're there or if I'm there, this will go forward. This will go forward because this is essential to the development of our country. We have these beautiful, what we call community clinics in Abaco, I think, and one in Exuma. Beautifully built, beautifully appointed, but still, Abaconians and Exumans and people all across the country got to jump on an emergency flight. If God forbid they suffer a traffic accident or something goes wrong in the boat while they're fishing. And that's because we don't have the expertise to man and manage these facilities. There is no way that in this 21st century, a Bahamian mother should have to fly to Grand Bahama or New Providence to give birth to a child. I mean, I don't know about many of you, but I was born in the house, right? There was a doctor in Abaco at the time named Dr. Gottlieb, Freddie Gottlieb's father. And he delivered me in the house. But we used to have midwives on other islands that delivered many children in their homes. And I think I saw something somewhere on the agenda or somewhere to do with midwifery. And that's something we must move on, and that's something I also commend. We must find a way to get the professional acumen that we need, and we can recruit them, because they're recruiting us. We can't keep nurses in the system fast enough because of what they offer them in the US and in Canada. But there are countries in the world that we can make similar offers to, and I commend that to the Minister of Health and the government. And he did so when he came to office, and I saw like about 30 nurses that came in from Cuba, which was a good thing to do because we needed the help. We also hire teachers from abroad to teach Spanish and other things. And so we need to look at, some of these other professionals that I believe the Bahamas could also become a place for medical tourism because of where we're situated in the region. People from the Turks and Caicos and nearby, they come to the Bahamas to take advantage of our facilities. And so if we look at a world-class healthcare facility, public healthcare facility, that can perhaps attract individuals in need from other countries to come and use our facilities, and thereby grow our tourism product as well, because we got some of the best doctors in the world. We got some of the best people in the world, bar none. As we are in every other strata of society, so are we in the medical profession. Meanwhile, Madam President, I commend this bill. I think it is a good and timely thing to do, but I don't want it just to be a Band-Aid. I want this bill to have teeth. I want this bill to empower the Minister of Health to do what he knows is necessary and essential in behalf of the interest of the Bahamian people. I thank you, Madam President.
Thank you for your contribution, Senator the Honorable Darren Hentfield. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Barry Griffin.
Good morning, and thank you, Madam President. I rise once again in this place on behalf of the Bahamian people and continue to be thankful for the honor to do so. I would also like to extend my condolences to our colleague, Senator Randy Roll, on the passing of his mother, Karen Johnson. Ms. Johnson was a stalwart in every sense of the word, dedicated, committed, and patriotic Bahamian. She believed in the progressive cause, and to her very last days, she was a nation builder. Now, many of you don't know this, but I have to call Senator Roll because one day many years ago, I got a call from Senator Roll. Both of our names popped up in a family WhatsApp group. We discovered that we were both part of the Johnson clan, descendants of Agnes Johnson lineage of the Berry Islands. So Karen Johnson was family. I was proud to work very closely with her this past election. When we needed reinforcements in Kalani on behalf of Senator Duncombe, the call was made, and Ms. Johnson was one of the first to answer. On election day, she worked the polls from day to night. She was a veteran, needed no instruction, and went right to work ensuring that the PLP was well represented on election day. As a young politico, I learned much from her, and I am now thankful I got to see her in action. To my cousin, Senator Roll, on behalf of my family and all of the Agnes Johnson lineage, I offer condolences to you. I know your mother was your rock, but rest assured, she will continue to be your rock, guiding and protecting you from above. Madam President, in our blueprint for change, we committed to updating the healthcare infrastructure in the Bahamas. This health and wellness commitment is not just for the mechanisms to treat physical ailments, but mental and other ailments as well. The legislation we debate today, at its core, speaks to our government's social agenda, which aims to bring dignity to the Bahamian people. While we are busy rebooting our economy and ensuring that Bahamians can live purposeful and productive lives, we are also prioritizing health and wellness. Madam President, we are walking and chewing gum. The goal of this mental health bill is not to start a conversation. So many Bahamians have spent decades waging long and lonely battles to be heard. Instead, it's about elevating the conversation that already exists to a national level and bringing mental illness out of the shadows. Make no mistake, Madam President, this bill is extremely progressive and will make us leaders in this region in this regard. We want to let people living with mental health challenges know that they are not alone, and we want them to be assured that their government is committed to support Bahamians, because struggling with a mental illness or caring for someone who does can be isolating. And I think everybody here who's experienced the issue in one way or another understands that. It begins to feel as if not only are you alone, but that you shouldn't burden others with the challenge and darkness day in and day out, what some call a cloud that you just can't seem to escape. The World Health Organization estimates that in any given year, 1 in 4 adults experiences mental illness. 1 in 4. 25% of people, thousands of Bahamians suffer from things like depression or anxiety, schizophrenia, or post-traumatic stress disorder. The young and older are affected at a similar rate, men and women. So we all know somebody, a family member, a friend, a neighbor, who has struggled or will struggle with mental health issues at some point in their lives. Madam President, it is critical then that our healthcare system, legislature, and members of society are ready and equipped to treat, care for, and support persons suffering from or showing symptoms of mental illness. Our own mental health professionals have warned us that with the increase in devastating and traumatic hurricanes and the ensuing economic hardship, we can expect an increase in mental health diagnoses in this country. This legislation is vital and comes at a crucial time. We do not know when our natural fortitude will be tested. That is why this legislation is so important. It puts people at the center of their care and treatment, preserving their dignity and participation in their care and ability to contribute to society. The reality is anyone's mental health can be challenged at any time, any place, any age. We've heard the statements, "She used to be so driven and accomplished, then one day she just lost it. He was such an upbeat person, but he hasn't been the same lately." We see people wandering the streets showing obvious signs of cognitive disturbance. And based on accounts from mental health professionals, we know that those who seek treatment can oftentimes go on to lead happy, healthy, and productive lives. Madam President, with the passage of this bill, help will be available. It's amazing how we think of mental health differently from physical health. You see commercials on TV about a whole array of physical health issues, and yet we whisper about mental health issues and avoid asking too many questions. The Disabilities Act was passed in 1969, giving protections to people with physical disabilities. It's taken a long time, but I'm glad that now in 2022, we are giving protections to people with mental ailments. We must remember that the brain is the part of the body too. We just know less about it. And there should be no shame in discussing or seeking help for treatable illnesses that affect too many people. We've got to get rid of the embarrassment. We've got to get rid of the stigma. Too many Bahamians who struggle with mental health illnesses are still suffering in silence rather than seeking help, and we need to ensure that men and women who would never hesitate to go and see a doctor if they had a broken arm or came down with the flu, that they have the same attitude when it comes to their mental health. Madam President, this bill also aims to meet the standards of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and acknowledge the advancements in the understanding of care and treatment of people with mental illness. This bill is robust. It has 13 parts with 76 clauses. The primary focus of the bill is on the rights of individuals and on the care and treatment of individuals and protection of decision-making of persons. This bill, Madam President, reflects decades of advocacy. The work on this bill stretches across the political divide, across numerous consecutive administrations. Madam President, we can help those who suffer from mental illnesses continue to be great colleagues, great friends, the people that we love. We can take out some pain, and give them a new sense of hope. But it requires all of us to act. And I'm happy that this government is stepping up to do its part. Today, less than 40% of people with mental illnesses receive treatment. Less than 40%. Now think about it. We wouldn't accept if only 40% of persons with other treatable diseases got help. Why should we accept it when it comes to mental health? It doesn't make any sense. The good news is there are plenty of professionals and groups that are stepping up to change that. I remember tuning into a live stream of a community meeting held by Minister Jo Beth Colby Davis, and the focus was on mental health. Dr. Daniel Lloyd, a decorated physician at the Sandilands Rehabilitation Center, was the speaker. I also saw that Dr. Lloyd spoke recently at a similar event held by Dr. Dwayne Sands, also in Elizabeth. But on the live stream that I watched, I remember him speaking so eloquently about this issue. He spoke about the need to speak openly about mental health so that people became accustomed to hearing stories and sharing, so that we get rid of the stigma that surrounds mental health. He spoke about the need to invest more in treatment facilities and treatments, and to invest in the professionals who work in this field. He also listed the many options for help, which I will repeat here today for anyone who needs the information. He stated that your first point of call should be your primary care physician for assessments and basic treatments. Your primary care physician, in turn, can refer you to psychiatrists and psychologists and other professionals. The Accident and Emergency Department at Princess Margaret Hospital is available for emergencies. The Community Counseling and Assessment Center on Collins Avenue is open to the public for walk-ins. And in specific cases, referrals can be made for care at the Sandilands Rehabilitation Center. There are also private and nonprofit organizations such as the Bahamas Crisis Center that are open to the public for assistance. Madam President, there are many doctors and other professionals working in this field, and we know that we need to build more capacity. But to those currently in the field, I want to say thank you for the great work that you do. Thank you for your advocacy, and thank you to the service of our people. It's because of these professionals and these organizations that we are beginning to see the landscape change in our country. You've got high schools now that are holding assemblies on mental health. You have organizations like Junior Achievement who are bringing in mental health speakers to talk to our kids. You have employers who provide avenues for support, and you have church leaders who are getting involved and getting their congregations involved. This is all great news. For years now, our mental health system has struggled to serve the people who depend on it. That's why this mental health bill is so important. We are creating the legal and functional framework to ensure that those who suffer from mental health illnesses are protected. For many people who suffer from a mental illness, recovery can be challenging. But what helps more than anything, what gives so many of our friends and loved ones strength, is the knowledge that you are not alone. You are not alone. You're surrounded by people who care about you and who will support you on the journey to get well. This government is here for you. And so, Madam President, that's what today is about. Bringing this conversation to a national level, setting a legal framework for protection and for the functional work that must be done. It is also about letting those who need help know that there's no shame in that. With that, Madam President, I am proud to support this bill. As a government, let's do everything we can to help our fellow Bahamians heal and thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Barry Griffin. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michaela Bonnet Ellis.
Good morning. Madam President, today I contribute to the debate on the mental health bill. And Madam President, as always, I wish to express my gratitude to the Leader of the Opposition for his continued confidence. I join with my Senate colleagues and express my condolences to Senator Randy Roll on the passing of his mother. I commend Matthew 5 and 4 to Senator Roll and his brother. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. You are in our thoughts and prayers. Madam President, on the weekend I had the pleasure of attending the Bahamas Girl Guides Association annual carol service. The carol service, like most events this year, is returning after a 2-year absence. Madam President, many years ago, I was a brownie guide under guide leader Karen Lightbourne at the Priory grounds at St. Francis Xavier Cathedral. I may be biased, but the Girl Guides Association is the nation's premier organization dedicated to the holistic development of young women and girls. As a brownie, I learned life lessons, earned badges, developed lifelong friendships, and mastered the art of ring play. I went on to become a girl guide at SAC, and under guide leaders the late Judith Adderley, Roxanne Shipman, and Marie C. Thompson. Words cannot fully express the impact these women had on my life. The motto of being prepared, the words of the guide pledge to do my best, to do my duty to God, to serve the Queen and my country, guide my every action and reaction. I wish to congratulate all the sunflowers, brownies, guides, rangers, and guide leaders that performed wonderfully on Sunday. It was a great start to the Christmas season. The mental health bill has been a long-term labor of love. Stakeholders and consultants have spent over 3 years developing this bill, which was meant to modernize mental health legislation in the Bahamas. This bill expressly focuses on strengthening the rights of and preserving the dignity of those persons diagnosed with mental health issues or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness. Madam President, unfortunately, this is a topic which I have had more experience than I would have preferred. And it's not because I'm a member of the Hannah Hasty Times family. We are not crazy. And I'm sure my good cousin, the member for Engliston, would agree that people just don't understand our magic. I've had to seek the assistance of the existing mental health legislation in my personal life and in my practice. I have had grandfathers diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, a disease often referred to as the long goodbye. It is a type of dementia that affects memory, thinking, and behavior. I've watched my grandfathers slowly forget people's names, where they are, and eventually how to chew and swallow. Vice President Griffin, Senator Roll, Senator Seymour, and I will be talking about Alzheimer's and dementia at Rotary Old Fort's meeting on Wednesday, the 14th of December at the Old Fort Bay Clubhouse. My grandmother had a series of strokes, which robbed her of her speech and her fine motor skills and eventually placed her into a coma. Depression and anxiety can have crippling effects. Losing loved ones to suicide has left an acute awareness in my life. I have had clients who have had family members suffering from dementia and muscular dystrophy. All of these experiences have one thing in common: mental health. There has so long been a stigma associated with mental health, mental illness. It was seen as something to be embarrassed about. Persons experiencing symptoms of mental illness were often reluctant to seek help. When we see someone exhibiting mental illness, we try to isolate them, whether it's discontinuing contact or crossing to the other side of the sidewalk. Fortunately, times are slowly changing. For example, a recent Scotiabank campaign to celebrate men's health during the month of November told men it's okay to seek counseling. Mental health problems do not define individuals. Persons suffering should not feel like they have to suffer in silence. As a community, as a God-fearing nation, we must do all we can to provide assistance to those in the community that need our help. We must actively change the way we speak, change the way we treat people with mental illness. This present legislation is a step in the right direction. This legislation provides a clear statutory framework for the treatment of persons with mental illness and the tools available for the management and affairs of those persons that are unable to do so as a result of mental incapacity. Section 15 of the Mental Health Bill deals with the use of enduring powers of attorney. An enduring power of attorney is a document which can give advance permission for the management of a person's affairs when the grantor, in the event, that the grantor becomes incapacitated, for example, due to stroke, dementia, or serious injury. So, for example, I can create an enduring power of attorney to give my sister the power to manage my affairs, including my property and medical decisions. Under Section 17, a person can make an advance directive for mental care. An advance directive is a document that states a person's wishes about receiving medical care in the event that they are no longer able to make those decisions themselves. An advance directive must be made in writing and witnessed by another person. It also must be revoked in writing in the presence of another person. It gives patients the opportunity to exercise more control over their treatment when they become incapacitated. Sections 48 and 49 of the bill allows for next of kin or caregivers to make an application to the Supreme Court to be appointed guardian of an incapacitated person, or to be appointed as a conservator for an incapacitated person. Guardians have the power to make personal and medical decisions. Conservators have the powers to administrate their property and financial affairs. As someone who has had to rely on the provisions of the mental health legislation, I know that this comprehensive legislation is only the first part of the process. Powers and provisions in this legislation must be supported by increased resources, more training opportunities for law enforcement, as law enforcement is often asked to be of assistance when we're trying to get persons exhibiting mental illness admitted to hospital on an involuntary basis. But getting persons exhibiting mental illness treatment is difficult. Convincing them to go to a doctor is another thing. Whether there is available space at Sandilands Hospital for inpatient treatment, whether on a short-term or long-term basis, is also a difficulty. In order for this bill to have the desired impact, we must make significant capital and human resource investments. Madam President, you may recall from our budget exercise that the estimated subsidy to the Public Health Authority, the body which governs our medical facilities, does not show an increase in reoccurring expenditure. This would indicate that there will be no new hires. And in the budget communication, there was no mention of expanding the capacity of Sandilands Hospital or even creating another mental health facility. In fact, to quote the fiscal snapshot released last month, subsidies tightened by $16.7 million, particularly for the Public Health Authority. The police force has also decreased their budget for training, but perhaps instead of weapons training, they'll receive training on dealing with persons exhibiting mental illness. This legislation is of no use unless we have the resources to conduct the evaluations, get the patient's treatment, and to treat the patients. Another tool that would be of assistance to our community would be a national dementia registry. The adage of once a man, twice a child is particularly true when you have a family member suffering from dementia. We want to protect the dignity of our loved ones impacted by this heartbreaking condition. But very often, we cannot do it alone. A dementia registry would allow the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Social Services to effectively manage the delivery of services and support to persons and caregivers impacted and affected by dementia. Caring for persons suffering from dementia must be a team effort. I know many persons caring for their loved one with little to no help. It is an incredible burden to bear, and it is a true definition of labor of love. Many families and caregivers could benefit from house visits by medical professionals, or simply someone to spend time with them so that you can go to the food store. I would say go to the bank, but we don't bank in person anymore. Or someone to sit with them whilst you go to work, or even you go to your doctor's visits. It's always preferable to keep individuals at home rather than as residents in a facility. But in order to know what services are necessary and who needs those services, we must have the data. A registry would give the government this information. While conditions such as dementia, schizophrenia, and bipolar disorder are genetic and easier to identify because of the disruptive nature of their symptoms, conditions such as anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder are stress-related, and persons suffering from those conditions are often able to hide behind the facade of wellness, some better than others. Our constitutional duty to make laws for the government and peace of the Bahamas also requires us to do our very best to create a less stressful environment for our people. It is undisputed that these are stressful times. The stresses of inflation are relentless, particularly during the Christmas season, when we all want to show our loved ones in tangible ways how much we appreciate them, but the dollars aren't going as far as they used to. And while we understand that the war in Ukraine is out of our control and the supply chain deficits have nothing to do with us, the VAT on breadbasket items, the VAT on medicine, the increased cost of electricity, the removal of the tax-free status of the special economic recovery zones fall squarely in the lap of this Davis-Cooper administration. They voluntarily brought these additional stresses on us. Now, imagine navigating all of that while not being able to bathe, shower, wash your hands, wash your clothes, wash your dishes, cook with water, or flush the toilet. The government has allowed the hygiene of Eleutherians to be compromised while COVID is still lurking.
On a point of order.
The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable
You know,
Ryan Pinder.
as the, I was going to stay quiet today. I was doing.
Yeah, you
my
did really
final
good at the joint session.
and allowing a very
Yes.
civilized debate to go on until my good friend and colleague started on with this foolishness, right? Let me tell you what happened with respect to water in Eleuthera, just so you could understand. It was the prior administration, and specifically the prior chairman of the Water and Sewage Company, who failed to pay the contractor for years and years, running up almost $2 million in arrears, to the point where they would not service or repair their facilities on the island. They let them degrade. There was no attention brought to it. And it is now up to us to try to fix the issues. We have put a mobile unit down there. We are shopping for other mobile units to put down there, whether on lease or purchase, to fix their problems and the issues that they put Eleutherians in. And I will not stand here idly by and let the facts be mischaracterized in this place, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ryan Pinder.
I was just say they've had over. Thank you.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Eleutherians have complained about these living conditions and the impact that it has had. They are stressed. There is no doubt that this has been a very traumatic time for them. The fiscal snapshot for the first quarter of 2023 has put our anxiety in a quantifiable form. We can see just how much we have paid in taxes. The Ministry of Finance has boasted that VAT revenue has increased $35.18 million over last year. But they're bragging about the fact that we have had to pay more taxes. That's more of our hard-earned dollars going to pay taxes rather than food or utilities or anything else. I've had to say in this place before that government VAT revenue will go up because of inflation. It means we are paying higher price for goods, which means that the tax is more expensive items will be higher. In the case of romaine lettuce, a case of romaine lettuce, $69. That means that we paid $6.90 in taxes on top of that price. But when the case of romaine goes, thank you. But when the case of romaine goes up to $120, the government then gets $12 in taxes. That's $5 more. It has been stressful. We are trying to make ends meet, and the government has not offered any real help. Government expenditure has also gone up. We know that the travel expenses have gone up, but do you know what has gone down, Madam President? Social assistance has gone down from 48.4 million to 6.5 million. There are mental illnesses which are triggered by stress, and while modernizing legislation, it is important that we must also look at how to mitigate the causes of mental illness to the extent that we can. We must ensure that we have the necessary auxiliary systems to give meaning to the statutory framework. To this end, I note that Section 72 says that the Minister of Health and Wellness may, which means it's optional, make regulations. They say the devil is in the details. So through you, I encourage the minister to make regulations to assist with the function and application of this essential legislation. One last observation. Section 7.1 expresses that every person diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness has the same constitutionally protected fundamental rights and freedoms afforded to others and protected by the Constitution. Can married people get those same constitutional protections? Madam President, through you, I remind the Attorney General that we are still waiting. The amendment to the Sexual Offenses Act. This week, the country and the Free National Movement lost a giant of a man. MCM Alfonso Boogaloo Elliott. It has truly been a long goodbye. And on behalf of my family and I would like to extend our sympathies to his wife Lorraine, his children, grandchildren, and extended family. I think, Madam President, that this may be the last occasion that I would rise in this place. No, it's not. Okay, so we'll say that later. Thank you, Madam President. I support this bill.
Thank you, Senator Michael Bonnet Ellis, for your contribution. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock.
Good morning, Madam President, Senate colleagues. Madam President, I join you and my colleagues around the table in expressing condolences to my dear friend, Randy Roll, on the passing of his dear mother. And I would just like to say to Senator Roll, as a brother and friend, I'm here for you, my brother. Madam President, this new mental health bill is the first major step in our country in over a century to put these issues front and center on the table. Front and center on the table in the public's view and the national debate stage. It is time mental health comes in out of the cold, Madam President. The bill before us is efficient and modern, and the drafters obviously took into account conventions at the international level and respected medical opinions and analysis in formulating this bill. The bill gives patients a plethora of rights which hitherto before were absent. The bill gives the professionals in this medical field the important guardrails and parameters to do their jobs and protect, serve, and treat their patients. The common thread throughout the bill is the respect for mental patients and their dignity, and the professional respect for the health workers who labor in this exhausting field. In this new age of Bahamian scholarship, research, and studies by the University of the Bahamas and other professionals, I want to introduce my contribution, the the remarks of two outstanding thinkers and social scientists and their opinion, which was recently published. Madam President, Christina Johnson is a master's level psychotherapist and mental health educator who operate Brightside Bahamas, a mental health and wellness practice in Nassau, Bahamas. Helen N. Roll, PhD, NCC, is the founder of Path to Wellness and Counseling and Psychological Service in Nassau, Bahamas. In their paper on how Bahamian attitudes are affected by Dorian and COVID lockdown, issues these scholars produce the document to which I am quoting. Christina Johnson and Dr. Helen Roll, Bahamian psychotherapists, conducted preliminary research into current regional attitudes towards mental health and mental health treatment via digital survey. I now quote from their thesis, with your permission, Madam President. And I quote, "We aim to establish a baseline from which we as clinicians and researchers could ascertain how best to assist Bahamians in realizing that mental health, a non-negotiable aspect, is to our overall health. Culturally, we have not embraced mental health as much as we could, or quite frankly, should. So have these traumatic events had any influence on how Bahamians perceive mental health? The answer is yes. There has been a shift in Bahamian attitudes towards mental health, and we see this specifically through the fact that Bahamians are given more consideration to mental health. The majority of all surveyed Bahamians agreed or strongly agreed that they now take their mental health more seriously since Hurricane Dorian and the COVID-19 pandemic. Johnson and Dr. Roll go on to say, while this is a win for the health of our country, it is important to acknowledge that it took our country's most devastating hurricane on record and a global health crisis with severe local financial repercussions for us to get to this point. This proves that just as with many other challenges our society faces, it is only when the challenges happen that they are addressed. We simply are far too reactive and not proactive enough. Prevention is better than management. And the time to respond is too late if it's only when the crisis occurs. It is notable that there is a difference between understanding support is needed and engaging in help-seeking behaviors. Stigma is a major barrier to seeking service, and in order for the collective mentality to change, the message that seeing a professional to assist in managing your emotions or stress in light of impactful situations like these is no different than going to a doctor to manage physical symptoms in light of an impactful illness need to be provided from a number of vantage points. They continue, and I quote, community-based intervention, such as through schools and churches, would be an exceptional form of outreach in dispersing the message of destigmatization. These are two entities that hold influence and importance in Bahamian society that could sincerely have a significant impact in addressing the need to nurture our mental health. Mental health is a public health concern, and it is clear that more emphasis needs to be placed on mental health care by our public health departments. While emphasis is placed on chronic illnesses like heart disease, diabetes, and cancer, these conditions do not affect the entire population. Everyone has mental health, and as such, we encourage the Ministry of Health and Wellness to continue to prioritize mental health as a central area of To change the landscape of mental health in this country, institutions of power must recognize its importance. It will take a change from the top down to help make significant and valuable impact. There also must be increased access to cost-effective psychological services. As we are aware that there are mental health resources, including free and low cost, that have been available even prior to Hurricane Dorian and COVID-19 pandemic. And we recommend that these services are expanded upon due to current demand. Having access to trained professionals and pair-based services in addition to professional services would also be an asset to Bahamians. In the wake of these crises, stress is at an all-time high. End quote. A very profound statement and finding indeed, Madam President. Madam President, Johnson and Dr. Roll continued, and I quote, "The stress Bahamians are experiencing is overwhelmingly financial or due to impactful loss like grieving the death of loved ones or housing instability. When what has become routine becomes tumultuous and unpredictable, our body's stress response impacts our mental health. Something important to note is that, as mentioned, we are still experiencing the pandemic 2 years later." End quote. Madam President, 3 years later, and the effects are evident all around us as to how mental health issues have become even more prevalent. If any of us were to walk out of this chamber and per se venture as far as Frederick Street, which is 2 blocks away, we all know that we will encounter someone who is mentally challenged. For this common occurrence in our streets, our communities, and our nations to coexist without any national bedlam and alarm and concern challenges the fiber of our national will to protect the most vulnerable among us. In speaking with my colleagues in the criminal courts, I was deeply struck by the weakness in the old Mental Health Act, which accommodated periods of incarceration on mental health patients. Yes, some heinous and disgusting acts were committed, but these persons ought not to have been held criminally accountable for those acts, and most certainly to condemn them to prison amounted to national failure. We seem to equate homelessness with mental health issues, and indeed, because of the ostracization, many mental health challenged persons find themselves living on the streets. The country reacted in its usual way. We are shocked just enough to pause for a second and to move speedily on, calibrating at the imprisonment of homeless persons found living in abandoned vehicles and buildings during the pandemic and the shutdowns. The competent authority of the day, despite their aggrandizement about their professional skills, had conveniently looped everyone into the same basket. Disobey, and you go to jail. There was no room for mitigation. I suppose, Madam President, deeply challenged in over their heads, if such a pun can be allowed, walking like zombies amongst us every day. We drive on by and look the other way. Heartless, Madam President. We don't want to be bothered. It takes more than a Sunday sermon on the virtues of the Good Samaritan in our Bahamas for those values to be enacted for transformative change, Madam President. In an age where we are learning so much more about diseases like dementia and Alzheimer's, we should be better informed and equipped to respond to the appearance of the onset of such diseases in our loved ones and neighbors. We go online and we come across the gawkers who use their smartphone cameras to capture the antics of a Jeremy, for instance, Madam President. People encourage the challenged among us to carry out certain acts in exchange for food and the small change of coins. In short, we take advantage of the weak and vulnerable, and that has to stop in this Bahamas, Madam President. There ought to be a punishment for it. And we share those persons acting out in their most vulnerable state as if they are not humans and not entitled to dignity, Madam President, and respect. We TikTok it. What is so funny about mental disease, Madam President? We can only change these conditioned behaviors by our united and resolute condemnation and by showing our support to get folks to a safe place of treatment. Madam President, I want to borrow from the remarks of the Honorable Minister of Health and Wellness recently, in which he prefaced this mental health bill. It is a report from the Nassau Guardian just a few weeks before the mental health bill was tabled in that other place. And I quote, Madam President, Minister Darville, while speaking at the release of the report by the Inter-American Development Bank and the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, which assessed the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on the Bahamas, noted, Madam President, that the country's challenges with mental health are complex. Darville noted that he will lay on in Parliament very soon a new mental health bill which will repeal the current legislation. With the shocks of COVID-19 on our mental health, we're seeing the impact on our mental health with challenges for our children all the way to the elderly. The mental psyche of our people is still in a difficult state. It has affected our physical health, financial security, and social networks throughout the country, and they remain challenged, Dr. Darville said. But he continued, and I quote, "We only need to look socially to be aware that our dire situation that exists in the country. I am about to lay in Parliament very soon a new bill that will repeal the current." He continued, "There are more people showing up on the streets with obvious signs of mental illness. It's a very complex issue because there are people who are vulnerable and it only takes certain shots for them to tip over and actually begin to display serious signs of mental illness. We have a serious problem in this country with mental health, and it has impacted our children in school, their performances on the job, and the social fiber, because we are beginning to see people who were functional before these shocks now completely dysfunctional and walking our streets." End quote. Madam President, many families among us lose loved ones to mental health. Health has become a commonplace. Mental health and health has become a commonplace. We meet them on the road, panhandling. We see them roaming through the garbage cans in search of food. The bus benches have become efficiencies and studio living quarters. They wander the seafront, gazing out at the sea. Madam President, we came out of the drug and narcotics invasion of our nation in the late 1970s and early 80s with so much mental health issues, drugs, free-base cocaine, and marijuana laced with other chemicals fried the brains of scores of persons, Madam President. Addiction became, and in many instances, is still a prevailing mental health issue. Madam President, the professionals who work to get this bill here today and the Minister of Health and Wellness, who is quite the Energizer Rabbit, in his responsible, aggressive transformation of his portfolio, have to be congratulated and commended, Madam President, for the magic bullet in this bill to work and to be sane to be working. It will require a new mindset, Madam President, from all of us to cooperate and teach and guide on the dignity of persons who this bill seeks to protect and provide treatment and care. Our hearts are deeply pained, Madam President, when we hear those horrific stories of our teenagers who take their own lives. The suicide of our children should be that most urgent of a wake-up call for every one of us. The suicide of adults should prick all of our consciousness. Children who became invisible in their own home environment and their schools and communities. We only hear the cries, the moans, the laments, the wailing when that final act takes place. What does this say of us as a people? As much as Bahamians love getting up in other people's business, unsolicited, the business of getting up in the business of saving kids from harming themselves, we don't get up in it. And then we see entire neighborhoods flocking outside homes, walkers pretending to care and acting concerned after the horrific tragedy of a suicide, when there was time to reach out and save and touch and protect. I may seem it, Madam President, I may seem harsh, but this is no matter for coddling and diplomacy. We are our brother's keepers, Madam President. It still takes a village to raise a child. Madam President, in the Bahamas, persons need to be assured of their confidentiality in seeking counseling. There are persons who are indeed or in need of such help, and they may be afraid to seek such assistance because the smart camera folks are on the outside waiting to share their secret. Put you on blast and on social media. This must end and must be punishable. Persons who work as medical assistants in such private and public clinics must be held to the highest standard of confidentiality. This bill seeks to provide that, Madam President. Madam President, our country is emerging from a nightmare of COVID lockdowns, emergency orders, competent abuse of authority, and heinous disregard and rebuke of common ordinary civil liberties, Madam President. Our nation reached a critical mass of stress, anxiety, fear, depression, loneliness, and death, Madam President. It is still taking some folks much longer than others to repair and revive and reclaim their space. Madam President, the COVID lockdown came soon after the tragedy of death and destruction from Dorian. We may never know the full missing body count that people who were doing the counting made it appear as if the count for non-Bahamians did not matter. The undocumented.
The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Hentfield. Can you please state your point of order?
I fear the member is misleading the public on this place. I don't know if the member can prove any official in the government, Bahamas, indicated the count of Bahamians was different or indifferent. And if he can't prove it, which is what I think he's suggesting, that we counted some more than we counted others, if he can't prove it, he should withdraw it.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Hentfield. Senator Pickstock, can you please
President,
respond?
the member across, Senator Aaron Henfield, who was the former member in Abaco, knows very well. I will retract my statement, but I will leave it right there.
Thank you, Senator Pickstock.
Madam President, we have to be transparent in this mental health modernization. We just can't put something down on paper, pass it in that place, send it to our place, and we send it to the governor's place, and we feel that we have done our jobs. The innovations, reliefs, safeguards, policies, and other items in this bill will require the participation of the Bahamian people who understand what is now required of every one of us and is committed to do just that. Madam President, the Bahamian people suffered unnecessarily during the COVID pandemic. It soon became very clear that the protocols of lockdowns and curfews could be abused and become the tool of political manipulation and subjection. Added that the stress of that angel who was working overtime, our most hallowed tradition of the rite of Christian church burial gone, families grieving together, all gone, the public morgue stacked to the ceiling and overflowing. Madam President, these instances had a profound effect on mental health in this country. Enter the food feeding program, Madam President. The historians and researchers of tomorrow will ask the question of us as to why the most wealth and affluent in our society, who had absolutely no precondition socialization with the masses of people now in dire need, they will ask, why was it that the high and mighty and affluent were put in charge of feeding the hungry masses? Can you imagine, Madam President, the rich and the privileged who have no idea at all about the struggling, typical middle class Bahamian family of corned beef and grits and sardines and cornmeal having to suffer this harsh racial and social political indignity? And we have in front of us what the scholars and researchers are telling us today impacted our mental health. That's what they said, Madam President. It was certainly enough to shatter the mental health of the most strong. Our people were subjected to this degrading and dehumanizing conduct. And to make it worse, Madam President, political operatives were moved from where you sit in your chair and given big perks, Madam President, and treasurers to transfer out and manage the food program in Grand Bahama and the Northern Bahamas. Madam President, these events all had an impact on our mental health at the time. Why would the historians of tomorrow now be curious about this political equation in the time of dire national urgency? The scholars and researchers of tomorrow may ask, is it true that persons who served at the highest levels of national coordination command for the Free National Movement in the snap September 2021 general elections, also given high-profile designations in the Food National Feeding Program and other areas of public assistance during this autocratic decree from the competent authority, Madam President?
Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Henfield. Can you please state your point of order?
Madam President, I think the member is misleading again, unless he can say who he's speaking about. I mean, I don't know what he speaks about. Persons in the high level of the election command and the rest of it who are part of the Free National Movement, he should withdraw it.
Thank you, Senator Henfield. Senator Pickstock.
Madam President, I don't understand the point of order to begin with. One. Two, I didn't call a name in my presentation, Madam President, right? And so I just simply don't understand the point of order.
Okay. Can you please proceed, Senator Pickstock?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam President, these are the issues which saddle and burden the Bahamians, people with mental disorder, and stress. I am not surprised that persons who sat around the table are still engaged as Jack in the Box, jump up every time they hear the truth, or or have to confront their legacy and history. Your leader remains. Your leader reminds you again about the price of political arrogance. Heed the words of your leader. Well, that's a good question. They don't know who the leader is. The police and the courts were weaponized to punish and punish severely. An elderly man sneaking out to go see his old and aged mother, who lived alone, to make sure she had something to eat and was not afraid of the night, caught, subjected to public shaming, and punished. A profound impact, Madam President. These things happened. They happened on their watch. They happened while they sat around the table. The Bahamian people were pushed to the brink of a mental showdown and meltdown, Madam President. Young Bahamians are still commenting on social media about the wedding for persons in an organization where all of the party's youth leaders reportedly openly broke the same COVID laws, and competent authority was pushing down the throats of everybody else. Madam President, I have this little sticky here to remind me how ministers of health were passing through a revolving door during this COVID emergency power fiasco. Health workers, those on the front line, had their blood pressure and their stress levels sent through the roof when they discovered that the next Minister of Health had improperly interfered with the disbursement of international funds to compensate frontline pandemic workers by adding his personal chauffeur and others to his wish list. Madam President, these are the easily verifiable truths. This country went through the trauma of Dorian and the COVID pandemic in a 2.5-year span, which pushed mental health issues to frightening levels. Little children unable to attend school, taking their own lives, Madam President. Madam President, this mental health bill brings into focus that dark period, aftermath of Dorian, and the madness of the competent authority, where mental health was challenged and our people made most vulnerable. Madam President, this bill gives the nation a new and fresh modern determination to take care of the most vulnerable amongst us, provide treatment, support, counseling for those afflicted, and to get help to those in need of help, and help those who are denied that help because of stigma and suppression. Madam President, I support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution, Senator, the Honorable Darren Pickstock. As many? The chair recognizes Senator, the Honorable Kirkland Russell.
Thank you, Madam President. President, as usual, I'm always thankful to Almighty God. Thank you. I know that it is by His grace and blessing that I am able to stand in this honored place to speak on behalf of the people of this great country. I am always reminded to thank our distinguished Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, the Honorable Philip Edward Davis, for this opportunity to serve as one of his administration's honorable senators. Madam President, I too would love to preface my contribution by firstly extending condolences to Honorable Randy Roll on the passing of his dear mother, Miss Johnson. I too lost my mother about 11 years ago, and my father had a saying, loose goat don't know how tie goat feel. And so I understand exactly what my good friend is going through, and the only true source of condolences I could offer to him at this time is to tell him to lean but on to Jesus. I want to also extend happy birthday greetings to my good friend and next member of Parliament for Kalani, the Honorable Ronald Duncan. Finally, I want to sincerely congratulate 37-year HIV survivor, Mr. Kevin Delancey Thompson, founder of HASB, which is HIV AIDS Survivors Benefits in Grand Bahama, and his hardworking board of directors led by President Tina Roberts for the incredible work they have been doing to educate and improve on the quality of life of persons living with HIV/AIDS throughout the Bahamas, but in particularly in Grand Bahama. On December 1st, HASB celebrated its 10th year as an organization bringing help and hope to persons living with this dreaded disease. You know, Madam President, Senator opposite mentioned in her contribution the fact that social services contributions were decreased, as if that is a bad thing. And rather than truly complimenting the government for the decrease, because the decrease is as a result of more persons in the society working, more persons in the society not having to rely on the social assistance program. And so I just didn't understand that particular point. Madam President, this bill we are debating today seeks to do is to draw serious attention to the importance of mental health awareness. Many leading countries in our hemisphere has adopted the principle that mental health awareness is important in educating the public on matters relating to mental health illness. Madam President, in countries such as ours, where the basic truths on persons suffering from mental health illnesses are many times viewed as a shame, and in some quarters, even a curse, practicing mental health awareness is the perfect tool to allow leaders to craft progressive messages and put programs in place that are geared toward helping reduce the stigma as well as the discrimination that people who suffer from mental health illnesses are unfortunately subjected to. Sadly, far too many of our citizens struggle with some form of mental health illness but do not even realize it. And although there are treatments, medicines, and other forms of effective therapies that are available, these vulnerable Bahamians or residents either do not receive the treatment, or on the other hand, by the time they do receive the required help, it is too late. Madam President, this bill will cause there to be a focused attention on the awareness, treatment, recovery options availability for all persons suffering with mental illness. I am so proud of the great work and effort that was put into this piece of legislation by the Minister of Health and Wellness, the Honorable Michael Darville, and his hard-working team at the ministry and other consultants. Madam President, we all agree that knowledge is power. And this bill, whether directly or indirectly, forces all of us to stop and take an introspective look at how we view and respond to those suffering from mental health illnesses, while reflecting on the holistic impact this bill will have on the further advancement of our country. One must put this into action. We must consider this piece of legislation another reason for the Bahamas to celebrate as we march towards 50 years as an independent nation. Madam President, this bill signifies another accomplishment outlined in the Davis administration's blueprint for change, while standing firm on the foundation of providing compassionate relief to one and all. Madam President, it is indeed a good feeling to know that we are doing what is necessary to scale the phobia and inequitable practices that has far too long been associated with this dreaded phenomenon. Madam President, these most vulnerable citizens and residents will now, in accordance with the statute laws of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, receive the kind of love, outpatient care, and compassionate assistance that is necessary for them to have an opportunity on the fresh start they need to once again be a well-rounded, productive citizen. That is what good governance is. Madam President, one may ask, what is mental health? According to the World Health Organization 2018, mental health can be described as the state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own ability, can cope with normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make contribution to his or her community. Therefore, it is safe for me to say that any behavioral pattern that varies from the definition can be considered a mental health illness. Madam President, I believe that one of the intents of this bill is to promote the understanding that mental health care is just as important as physical health care. In fact, studies show that mental health is vital to the functionality as a human being. And as we pursue excellence as a nation, it is important that all and sundry invest in, promote, protect, and wholeheartedly work daily to restore his or her own mental health. If we are going to work productively raise the next generation of Bahamian leaders effectively, and build a country where our bearing is marked by the world as first class. Madam President, whether you're talking about anxiety disorder or mood disorder, the one thing we are certain of is the fact that there's always a trigger that brings on the mental illness, such as major disasters, whether man-made or natural. Then there are economic and social challenges, such as loss of jobs or even underemployment. That is that group of people we call the working poor. Separation, such as divorce. And there are triggers like substance abuse, drugs, and alcohol. What about dieting obsessions, obsession with image, and the dreaded peer pressure? These triggers are also known to have serious negative impact on children's mental state as well. Madam President, allow me to shine a little light on the impact of underemployment on the mental health of workers. Underemployment is defined as when you have a job, but you work less hours or days than you want to. It is also tied to job insecurity because the worker has no guaranteed work schedule. Benefits are very limited, and in some cases, non-existent. And finally, it can also include working on a job that does not match your skills, qualifications, expectations, or experience. Madam President, in the Bahamas, persons living with disability are far too often victims of underemployment as well as job discrimination, resulting in unnecessary hardship, stress, and even mental illness. Underemployment rears its head in that form of employment referred to in this country as casual labor. Sadly, on islands like Grand Bahama, casual labor dominates the employment pool within the industrial park sector and has also been a hiring tool of successive government. However, I want to put a plug in here for the Public Service Department. We had a program, Madam President, over, I believe, the last 10 years or so. Program used to be known as the 52 weeks work program. I believe the program meant some good. I speak now as a trade unionist. I believe that the program honestly meant some good. However, you put people almost in a baseless state where no job security, no future, no guarantees. And so what the public service has sought to do now is to reshape the 52 weeks program, and now it is known as the Public Service Professional Engagement Program. And that particular program now puts the worker on the path to permanent employment. And so here again, you're talking about the reduction of mental stress among the working class. Madam President, mental health challenges is no doubt widespread throughout the labor force. Many workers find themselves unable to make ends meet, unable to provide their basic needs for their families, such as housing, food, medical needs, and so on. This New Day government, led by the Honorable Philip Edward Davis, have seen the suffering and pain on the faces of workers and their unions, and have made a solemn commitment to usher in a system founded on the principles of justice and fairness. Madam President, to address the compendium of issues that created anxiety in the workplace, unnecessary hurdles for unions, as well as poor work-life balance among ordinarily good workers, which also generate mental health illness among workers. The government, while even in opposition, agreed to a memorandum of understanding with unions. This MOU was signed in August of 2021. Signing on behalf of the unions were Mr. Obie Ferguson, Jr., President of the Commonwealth Trade Union Congress, Mr. Tyrone Morris, Secretary General of the same Congress, Mr. Bernard Evans, President of the NCTUB, and Mr. Paul Maynard, Vice President of the NCTUB. Signing on behalf of the Progressive Liberal Party were the Honorable Philip Edward Davis, QC, now KC, MP and leader, and the Honorable Frederick Mitchell, who was at the time opposition spokesman on labor and senator. The agreement outlined some 23 common goals in pursuance of equity and the upliftment of the working men and women in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And it outlined an agreed formula to dispose of outstanding matters related to industrial agreements. Madam President, then the government made good on its promise and signed a MOU to establish the Decent Work Country program for the Bahamas 2021 to 2026. The Bahamas became the first Caribbean country to launch a second-generation Decent Work Country program. And through the Decent Work Country program, the ILO will work in close partnership with the government of the Bahamas and the Bahamian social partners, the trade unions, to address decent work challenges in the country. Then came the outstanding payments to nurses who would have toiled in the vineyard to fight the dreaded COVID-19, a matter that caused unnecessary stress, mental stress among that group of hard-working Bahamians. Madam President, then came along the long overdue promotional exercise for many immigration officers and custom officers. Again, the aim was geared around bringing happiness to a demoralized group of workers. Then came the minimum wage increase. This administration, though, understands that the $50 per week increase in basic salary will not eradicate poverty or solve all the financial and mental issues workers at the bottom of the pay scale are confronted with on a daily basis. Rather, what the government is focused on is moving towards a national livable wage scheme. And so, the increase is a move in the right direction, and it is in line with the Philip Davis mandate to bring compassionate relief to all. Finally, Madam President, on the whole matter of mental health illnesses in the workplace, the government understands that for many workers, better terms and conditions are established within industrial agreements. Since coming to office, this administration has made a conscious effort to meet and treat with unions in good faith. Let me give you a snapshot of what has truly happened on the industrial front. The Bahamas Customs and Immigration Allied Workers Union Industrial Agreement has been completed. The Bahamas Nurses Industrial Agreement has been completed. Note that all nurses from the Department of Public Health and the Public Health Authority will benefit from the new and better terms and conditions. The Bahamas Educators Managers Union Principals and Senior Officers Industrial Agreement has been completed. The Bahamas Educators, Counselors, and Allied Workers Union, Beckerville, as a second teachers union, industrial agreement completed. The Public Managers Union, that's the managers NIB, completed. Managers of UB and managers Bahamas Air in advanced negotiations. The Bahamas Electrical Workers Union, BPL line staff, completed. The Bahamas Air Traffic Controllers Union in advanced negotiations. Consultant Physician Staff Association, senior doctors and physicians in negotiations. Hospital Doctors Association, Bahamas doctors, that's the junior doctors, in advanced negotiations. Negotiation with the Bahamas Hotel Managerial Association, Kentucky, in negotiations. The Bahamas Electrical Utility Managers Union, BPL, in negotiations around the table. General Workers Union, which includes BAIC, Bahamas Waste Management, BTVI line staff, are all currently in advanced negotiations. Bahamas Industrial Manufacturing and Allied Workers Union, Morton Salt, in negotiations. Water and Sewage Management Union, in negotiations. Bahamas Brewery Distillers and Workers Union, in negotiations. BTC, completed. ZNS, in advanced negotiations. BASAWU, that's Water and Sewage Line Union, in advanced negotiations. Bahamas Union of Teachers, BUT, industrial agreement completed. Madam President, that's 22 groups of workers. Their industrial agreements, where their better terms and conditions are outlined, that will relieve the stress and provide them with some form of livable wage conditions, are completed, or they are around the table negotiating. Yes, we have seen unions exercising rights to demonstrate, and I am confident that those conflicts will be resolved once all and sundry operate in good faith. Madam President, my people in the North who have faced unprecedented levels of disasters, shrinkage in economic opportunities, and a sluggish return to a strong job market, on their behalf, I welcome this mental health bill. And I welcome this bill, Madam President, because I have seen and witnessed the uptick in mental health cases. Senator Henfield spoke eloquently to the issues that are amplified, I wouldn't say exclusive, but amplified on islands of Grand Bahama and Abaco. But the tragedies that took place on those islands as it relates to storm, I agree with Senator Henfield that those things have impacted the lives, the mind, the mental state of our people, and particularly our children, immensely. And so this bill is very timely. The crisis is real in the North. And so finally, our hurting citizens, families, and friends who require outpatient care. You see, I think the 69 Act, you had to be an inpatient in the Sunlands, in a dire ward in Grand Bahama, in hospital, to get care. Now, persons suffering from mental illnesses can get the care that they need within the outpatient system. They can receive the therapy training, especially for caretakers who are normally relatives, the medicine, counseling, among other assistance for all forms of mental illness. Madam President, this bill assures those suffering from mental health illnesses and their family members, who are, for the most part, the untrained caregiver, that you are not alone, that this government sees you. You have value, and we will do all that is possible to keep you moving forward. In the words of Ellen R. Sachs, this bill says to the mentally challenged individual, the humanity we all share is more important than the mental illness we may not. Madam President, I am indeed honored to fully support this mental health bill. May God continue to bless all those suffering from mental illnesses, and may God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Russell, for your contribution. As many?
Madam President, we are approaching the 1 o'clock hour, and I think we are in a position to complete this debate shortly after 1 o'clock. I would just ask that the move that the Senate do sit beyond 1 p.m. on today, December 8th, 2022.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and second that the Senate sits beyond the 1 p.m. hour. As many as in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. The Senate will sit beyond the 1 p.m. hour. Randy? As many? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Reuben Raming.
Senator Raming.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Let me start off in the absence of our president, hopefully still in a hearing, by congratulating her for representing this house so well in the joint sitting. And let me boldly, because of the truth of the matter, go on record as saying, even though there was no contest and no competition, it was a very noble force in terms of sitting in a house. Nonetheless, there were two houses represented in the same place. And I must say that I can be supported in the fact
And not only did all the ladies in both houses speak very, very well, but as the presiding officer of this house, our president acquitted herself very, very well in representation, I think, of all of us.
Yes.
We stand for. But indeed, that representation also goes forward to the general public, the Bahamians who were wrapped up in her message and represented in her message with such strength, clarity, and vigor. And I could not stand today long acknowledging that, because it was not just myself, including my household, acknowledged how hope of presentation. He is dealing with, and I thank God for the support mechanism that he has, but he also has friends, brothers, and sisters in this place as well. So we extend our condolences to you, Senator Roll. A lot of interesting things arose in this mental health bill, and I think I'll probably start with you, Mr. Vice Chair. I agree with you that this bill is not a overnight thing. That is done over a decade of work, and I think it's reflected in how well it has been drafted and the contents and the details, and it seems as if this bill has, for the most part, sufficiently crossed T's and dotted I's. And I think it will stand as a testament that when the baton is passed and the relay is continued with the same fervor as the anchor portion, straight to the end, the starter straight to the anchor, that our parliament can produce effective bills that not only is substantive, not only monetarily, otherwise, but hit the hearts of the Bahamian people and address important needs. I also want to just take this moment. I enjoy always listening to Senator Russell, and to highlight my agreement on things that has been said. This mental challenge thing extend and is triggered by many, many causes. That's why we ought to truly be our brother's keeper, and we must learn to treat everyone in a way in which we like ourselves to be treated. I believe everybody, every human being, though maybe without a medical degree or PhD or some scholarly time spent under the tutelage of some expert, is in and of themselves by virtue of living a mental health practitioner and expert themselves. Because he that feels it knows it. And even the strongest man who may not have actually, or woman who may not have actually found themselves in a clinical mental breakdown, has found themselves on the precipice of that emotional strain on many occasions. But through the coping mechanism and support mechanism of family, friends, or simply getaway or fishing or something, or their faith in God has found a way to pull them from that edge and bring them back to a sane state. Because we as human beings are triggered by many, many things. And as we well know, just as the people in Abaco and Grand Bahama still is suffering from PTSD as it relates to the storms and Dorian and all the other vicissitudes of life that has been hitting that island and the economic struggle, many of us have it in our lives as well. Many times we find ourselves having deja vus or flashback just by something triggering a negative memory that causes our body to react. I think all of us as human beings could relate to the fact of an incident or something happening, and we could feel almost as if all of our intestines jump up into our throat. It goes to show how an emotional trauma could literally affect you physically. I know of persons who suffer eczema and other skin ailments and pressure issues and heart issues that is triggered from outside events. And we must realize that not only words hit harder than a fist, but the lack of compassion and the neglect of the necessities of human rights can impact us because we are all social creatures. So indeed, it is important for all of us to look at our brothers and be our brother's keeper. For the same road that we pave and the same issues and love or kindness or lack thereof that we give is the same thing we will measure and be given back to us. So mental health is a very critical thing. Number one in many societies as a government job is to build a stable and balanced society and opportunities in which the society can reflect and develop and express itself through its own talents and ingenuity. We do find that one of the number one stresses, especially in this hard economic time and the depression and recessions that we're experiencing on different levels, and the high cost of food and living and housing and everything else that is around us, one of the major vexing issues is the issues of financing, having our monies and being able to address. I think one of the greatest pains in life is that word called disappointment. And disappointment simply is expectations not fulfilled. So when somebody is expecting something and it doesn't happen when they expect it, it is called disappointment. And disappointment in and of itself has a snowballing effect. Because when you promise someone that you will do something on one day, then they calculate the value of that promise and they go and they tell another person that I expect this on this day, so I'll be able to cover you on that day. And then that person go to tell this other person or his banker, okay, I'll have it on this day because I expect my brother to have it on that day who is expecting this person to pay him on that day. And so when things are delayed and set back, it can set a repercussion, it can set a negative wave in people's lives. And I think many of us, no matter what level that we may be on in life, would have understand the pain of having the bill collectors or the other bill collectors called children and their needs pressing on you and the needs of your household on your head and on your mind and you're counting every penny and you feel the actual real stress in your life. And though nobody has touched you, you go home and sleep at night as if you just had a rumble in the jungle with Muhammad Ali or a tussle with Mike Tyson. It's simply because every day you get up, you understand you have to achieve this goal in order for your household to run smooth and to move forward effectively. I say that because these things impact people in many ways, and we've heard about the stories in the US where they coined the term go postal. When persons lose their jobs or lose contracts, and these are things that their heart and mind and their lives projection for that year or those few months had been built on, or their mortgages were attached to, and when these things lost, sometimes people has no other coping mechanism. And because everybody is built differently, they tend to respond differently, and some people actually retaliate in very violent ways. And sometimes it's not outwardly, sometimes it's inwardly in the home. They get more aggressive towards their children, they get more aggressive towards their spouses. And they wonder why this Jekyll and Hyde syndrome would have appeared in mommy and daddy, but because of the things that they struggle with either on the job or trying to provide for life, the pressure is just so high that the little things set them off. These are very real, clear, and present dangers that is around us. And as Minister Russell spoke about the union situation, it caused me to reflect on, even recently, just as early as yesterday, police reserve officers were speaking to me and asking with grave concern as to the fact we got our promotions, but we haven't received our remunerations. And they're wondering how and maybe the Minister of Financial Services could advise of when there is a projected time that they can effect it. We sit and we see a lot of other persons who's sitting down, they're waiting for these opportunities because these people have already banked on this. We found in many situations that persons find themselves struggling and wondering how and when. I give thanks to Beaches and Park as an example. They would have, I'm pretty sure to the best of my knowledge and my belief that they have addressed the vast majority of those matters in that regard. But it pains me because I had been trying for a few weeks to resolve a matter of one person that was left out in the cold. And even after, and directly speaking at the top, the response was terrible. It was just terrible. Until my last communication basically was, brother, we dealing with people, man. We dealing with humans. Their family. If it ain't a priority to you, then just say that and let me just stop sending messages. Because why? Again, we're dealing with people. So when we find situations where contracts would have been unceremonially just revoked from Bahamian people, that set trauma throughout families. And the interesting thing about Bahamas is, when you think you hit a yellow family, you're hitting red. When you think you're hitting red family, you're hitting yellow. When you think you're hitting a red husband, you're hitting a yellow wife. Or when you think you're hitting a yellow wife, you're hitting a red husband, because we are still just interlinked in this whole thing. So when it comes down to paying what is owed, we should realize we're just behemoths, and what is due should be paid. I agreed with the Minister of the AG, the Attorney General, when earlier this year they, through a special amendment, supplementary budget actually got an additional $17.7 million to pay out the, what do we call them again? The judgments that was held against the government. I agree with that, because I've been sick and tired of the common practice of the biggest blatant abuser of credit being the government. But I still have to reflect on the many police officers who would have won their cases in their tribunals and yet to either be restated or to get their balance of their half pay, or many other persons who would have won their matters are sitting here in limbo, and in worst cases where persons had actually died. And because of that half pay or that situation where they were put on of the case that they won and was taken off the job and can't be paid in a reasonable time, the family has been suffering. Some to the point that they could not even bury the loved one because they're expecting this money that they know they would have won and it had not been paid to them. Why? By the same government, each of them, FNM, PLP, always say we are loving government, but why are we neglecting these people? We have people who have going back generations who have had land situations with our government that is being clearly that the land was theirs and the government had acquired it, and yet to this day still have not failed to pay. And these persons had tremendous rolling snowball effect of negativity that has been impacting their homes. Some has actually lost their homes when there's judgment of significant sums owed to them by their very own government, and yet they find themselves on Skid Row. We need to do better as a nation, and we need to do better as a people, and we need to prioritize our people. I would not even get into the situation of small businesses when they give and provide services to government. The money takes so long and harsh that sometimes it is better off they have not extended that opportunity than to not be paid 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, 10 months. They're not like many of the larger corporations that could absorb that, or larger entities that could wait a year and so on and so forth. But the mom and pop shop need a greater turnaround. Maybe we need to make specific regulations or policies to ensure that business that fall within a certain cap are prioritized with payments. Something of that nature, because as a small business person, and many of you who started small and end up large know what it is, the sacrifice it is to run a small business and build that business as the only source of income and also to build a family. So this mental health situation and the things that trigger it is very, very real. Mental health issues can come out of ignorance and verbal abuse. It could come from, we see as spoken of the president in her speech at the joint session, about the issue of marital rape, and sometimes some of it is triggered as a result of physiological changes in the spouse. Something as simple as menopause could change the way a woman reacts physically, sexually. Otherwise, the husband don't understand it. He getting mad, she getting frustrated, everything else. Because why? We don't take time to diagnose each other. We don't give each other the same due care and attention we expect for ourselves. We always want somebody to understand your way. But do you take this time to understand their way and what they're going through? And the end results end up being tragedy. Then we also got to look at this generationally. I am reminded painfully often, as I sure that you all would have seen yourself at times, a mother walking to school with a little child whose feet could barely keep up with mommy as she walked into school. She's all frustrated, probably with another 2 children in her hands, and slapping down the little child and cussing the child out because of the child can't keep up with the child, or the child is tired, and you see the frustration of the mother bearing down onto the child. And I understand that, and I believe, and I can stand correction, in the spirit of which you didn't say, but this 52 weeks, all those gravities is wrapped up in those persons and those programs, because those programs paid at that time the minimum wage. And we know in many instances some of the persons carry a heavy load with that. So the minimum wage increase is also beneficial to them. But I must also hasten to add that we changed the 52-week program, and we extended it and we adapted it to the point that we guaranteed that we were training persons in the 52-week program so that we can have them placed within a year in the institution. Because beforehand, persons just used to come, sit, make it go, and there's no better situation. They were no better for it coming into the 52-week program. But what we were doing we made the calculated decision, especially after the experience in the Ministry of Education, where persons were sat there and they were just sitting around the halls. And the system was being abused so much so that some persons never actually used to report to work and still getting paid. So we made a situation and a system in place whereas those persons were not only assigned, but they were trained. And when they were trained based on their rating, they're guaranteed to be enrolled into the ministry or encouraged to be enrolled in a private institution. Mental health is a very serious thing. I have to also go on with things because we've seen it around in many which ways. I remember when I started the Kiwanis Club of Fox Hill, and we were doing a community program on the Fox Hill Park. And we were set up right on the main basketball court, and rat-a-tat-tat, guns, shots was fired, and persons got hit. And I was there, and you could feel the bullet that hit the young man and traveled all the way down, and you could literally feel the bullet still hot underneath the skin, down from where it was, and the female was shot in the arms, and you see the trauma that was on people's faces. I remember during that Christmas when we were sitting down right after the Junction Rush, and we was on the park in Fox Hill, and you remember the shooting on Fox Hill. And I have a picture on my phone that I go through every now and again when I'm going through my phone of my good brother Tunde with a bullet went through his neck. I remember strong people who, Fox Hillians, trained Marine like dancer. Strong man, one of our Marines. And I remember one time being around him and there was a truck that backfired. And although he didn't flinch or do anything at the car, I saw his body just react because he's right in the midst of that horrific shooting. I spoke to him about it. And it took a long time for people to recover. That is why I think somebody intimated in their speech. I had heard how people abuse people through social media. I don't like that. I don't like that in any which way. And I've said it in the other house, it's shame on any man or any party or any individual that goes to the extent of trying to ruin a woman's reputation by bringing them down, or anyone's reputation by bringing them down. There's a way and a proper way to do things, and I'm talking about getting into their personal lives. These are things that could bring persons to a point that could get posted. A mild-mannered person like me, you would be surprised to know what I would do to you if you hurt one of my children. And it's in all of us. It's in all of us. So we need to try our best not to go to that place what they call there, because the people who think their heads are so bad don't realize that Mr. Nice Guy is a man too, And it reminds me of the song sung by Kenny Rogers. Remember the song, The Coward of the County? And they always sit there and they would mock him until they touch his girl. And I remember the song said, and they jeered him and thought he's walking away, and he turned and locked the door. Lock all them in. We are all humans. All of us have a point in the place. I dare to say, even the Bible says, even the devil loves his own. So if that's the case, we must really learn to treat each other properly. And I say that because I'm coming to a point which is some really, really hard truth, which I think this bill has impressed me with the most. I look around, I see many persons, because they married with their 2.3 kids and everything else, condemning the lady with 6 kids, all different age and all different names and everything else. And although it's not socially the ideal thing, they try to kill something that is already in existence instead of trying to make her or help her be better. I've heard about the stories in our hospital of the, first of all, just to highlight, because I believe accentuate the positives before you even present the negative, there are some nurses and some doctors in our hospital that I have seen riding on a white horse just by a smile, and how they treat people in the hospital that made a difference, and their service was better than the medicine that they got. Because a smile and a good treatment is real medicine to people. I've seen it happen. The same way I have seen, even in private and in public wards, how some nurses are treated mothers in the hospital because of their opinion of that person, how much children they got. Talk to them bad and treat them like some. I've seen it and I've heard it all the time. So when I compliment people, even in the medical fields and even like some officers, I do it deliberately, also understanding that there are some people who need to really check themselves. Just recently, in the last quarter, I had 2 engagements by persons who had relatives died in the hospital, and they were persons in the medical field. And when you listen to the story of how their relative was treated in the hospital, and they had their facts and everything lying up, and the only thing they were scared of is their very own jobs. They hadn't had time to mourn the loss. They were mourning the treatment. And yet I've seen times when members came there and their loved ones have been dying in the most uncomfortable way, but because of the service of a particular nurse or doctor, that just eased their suffering and eased their suffering away, because they say, boy, this nurse has been with me. I've known people just in our church just Sunday past. The preacher was talking about a nurse in our church, how when his wife was dying of cancer, how this nurse came to his home and was taking care of his wife down to the point in time she died, and still used to be calling and seeing how he's doing, even a year after, et cetera, et cetera. These are the kind of things. Because we're talking about things that we can go on through. All of us is but an accident away from becoming somebody who under the Disability Act. All of us is but a stress away from having a temporary, and God forbid, a permanent break. But we need to set up things in our society that not only benefits the wider society, but benefit us. I've said before in the place, if we build a country that's good enough for you, then you build a country that's good enough for me. When you build a hospital and you focus on building it so that your mom can be comfortable when she go there, that means when your mom go there, she's going to be comfortable too. Let's not do it as we're doing something for them. Let's build a country that we're building is good enough for me, good enough for my family. Let's serve food that is good enough for me, so it's good enough for you. Let's give service that is good enough for me, then it's good enough for you. Let's give love that I would want to receive, so I want to give it to you. And this bill, to me, is one of the best pieces that I would have seen in a while. And I would take the time to go through some of the points that really gave me pause to correct some of the things that you would have heard me complain about. One of the things I love in this bill, and I have not seen articulated in much other documents, even in my time in both these places, is that the section in here which says the rights and protection for persons with mental illness. I found this so potent and powerful. It's almost like a patient bill of rights. Because many times you've seen, even when police officers handle somebody who may be homeless or mentally disabled, if it wasn't for the good officer on the scene, they rough them up. Treat them any kind of way. Why? Because there's no accountability. Who can believe you? What's going on here? Nobody can check for you, man. You on here, dirty bum. You on here, this. You've seen it happen. But here it is we see right now, and this is what the public really need to absorb, some of the things in this bill, because they're not going to have the time to read all, how much of these pages? 50 pages all in here. And I'll take the time to read one or two things that I consider so potent. One, in section 7, it says the constitutional and other general rights of persons with mental illness. Every person designated, diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness has the same constitutional protected fundamental rights and freedom afforded to others and protected by the Constitution, subject only to the exceptions and limitations of this Constitution. Oh, I'd like to see this posted in the wall of a hospital and in the precincts of all our defense force and police force officers and our nursing homes, where I've seen good care and I've seen bad care of persons. Yes, I understand it's trying and difficult handling somebody with Alzheimer's, but you are a professional. Treat that person with dignity, and this bill protects the dignity. It says a couple of things, and I'll try to skip through some of them, and it lists the rights that was in there. enjoying equal enjoyment of the highest attained standard for physical and mental health. Next right, has an inherent dignity, worth, and privacy. You go into some of these places in the hospitals and you see the person that is invalid, all their body exposed, anybody who walks in could see, there's still dignity to that person. Sometimes you don't see them even trying to clean them up. That's one of the terms, and we have good old folks, senior citizens home in Pinewood. One of the things I did one time was I took some masseuse in to the old folks home, the senior citizens home in Pinewood, because I know the importance of contact and care. You know where I learned that? When my daughter Robin was a premature child. And if you saw her in the incubator, her whole hand went around the tip of my finger. I still have that photo. Her whole hand could have barely got around the tip of my finger. And Dr. Shaw, one of the things she's saying, how important it is for development, she needs contact. She needs to hear the voice, the soothing songs. She needs to have the bodily contact. You just can't just show up and drop something off. Not that I was ever going to do that. But it shows that even the senior citizens, they need that positive contact. And trust me, they can feel when a nurse or somebody who has treated them bad, even if they're blind, they can feel it and their body reacts. And you can see the difference when somebody who takes care of them, then they hear the voice, they perk up. They say, isn't that sister, sa? Because they know that nurse or that doctor treats them in a whole different way. But this locks that in. And it says, and I'm just going to skip through it, it says, respect for his will and preferences. And that's important because in those homes, when you're dealing with those persons, it's like my way or the highway. No, don't. This person may have a mental illness. They may not be in all their faculties, but they still have a will. They still have preferences. And wherever appropriate, you try to meet that because you're trying to give them a sense of normalcy. That is very, very important. And F said, with respect for his individual social, economic, and cultural background, family circumstance, language, ability to communicate, age, disability, religion, and other matters pertaining thereto. So the Muslim find himself in a situation where they're having a mental breakdown or in one of these hospice care. You must realize you may be Baptist, but as a Muslim. You respect that person for where they are and you meet them where they are, and I'm glad to see it enshrined. So clearly, not only that we can reward people for high standards and meeting it, so when we have days that we celebrate nurses and doctors and caregivers and police officers, we can say, listen here, you have met these standards. I'm glad that it's enshrined because we have to train our officers now, defense force, police force, caregivers, etc., everyone who will come in contact and even generally share how to handle people with these kinds of situations. Because sometimes we see somebody that seems to be violent, but the person is just having a mental breakdown and it's not even geared towards you. The person is more concerned with the ants he's feeling on his skin or the sting in his head, and you think he's fighting you and resisting an officer, so you step it up and you get a little more aggressive and you step it up according to the order of aggression by the police force, but you fail to diagnose that the man who's flailing his arms all over the place isn't even checking for you. He's feeling in his head that something is going on. This is very, very important as it relates to that. Respect for sexual orientation. This protects the individual in so many ways that I hope that beyond the just go find it in the government website, that we find ways to distribute this to more social NGOs. I always look at these things and say, hey, they're grandiose, but hey, where the money going to come from? They say, don't mind the noise in the market, but the price of the fish. And when I look at Section 8, the right of access to mental health and medical services as a right. Now, that's a bold statement. You can't come tell people this, they're right. And then it ain't right because they can't access their right. Or they can't afford this fundamental right. And the bill addresses it, I think, in a very, very satisfactory way. I'm going to read this section here, which is very important. Every person diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of a mental illness shall have the right of access following the mental health services run or funded by the ministry. So in other words, they have right of access to any of those things And it is funded by also the ministry, because I was going to ask, when they said in section 12A, affordability, is like, affordability, what you're talking about? And then later on, they came on down in section 3, where it says, where no mental health services is available in settlements, and this is speaking to the family islands, because they said also, in this bill, access by persons throughout the Bahamas. And we know that's difficult, but it's addressed right here for the public to actually hear, that a person seeking mental health services shall be transported at the cost of the ministry to a settlement or district where such services are available. And that is very, very important. So even those in the far-flung islands of the Bahamas, where they may have a situation with that kind of a mental breakdown or need, should be aware that you don't have to sit there. You don't have to lock the person in the house. Literally, something came to mind right in Elizabeth Estates. I remember that clearly. The person is a section of the house that has bars, and they have him locked in this room. And yes, it may be sort of ignorant or frustration. Okay, we're trying to keep him safe, but it's still locked in this room. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. This bill guarantees that you can have this person diagnosed there on the island, and if the services aren't there at the cost of the ministry, they will take him where they need to in the nearest proximity to that island to get the service. And that is important, because we all know important to health is community and family. You may not be able to handle your grandmother or your mother with Alzheimer's very, very well, and her mind may be slipping. But even the occasional visits where you could catch her in that moment of clarity is beneficial to her and also you. So having access to your family is very, very important, and I'm glad to see it clearly outlined in writing in a comprehensive document. And it gives me the sense that, yes, we are really looking out for these persons who cannot or may not be able to look out for themselves. And even when it spoke to representing them as it relates to their social economic background, family, class, etc., it is very, very fair that if we have, God forbid, a former governor general, and those cases, you do something according to that class. That is natural. That is not discrimination or anything else across the board. You know, if you have a former high-ranking commissioner or somebody of that nature, it is natural. All right? And so it recognized all these things and it highlighted it. And for that, it makes me very, very glad. And again, I have to encourage the public to look at this. And further looking at this in section 9, I'll just read this one just for reference, because it speaks to, like I said, the right to live in a community. It has started to get to a point in this country that people with mental illness almost start to get treated like persons at the lazaretto. You would want to try to segregate them, but although they cause pressure on the community through their unusual actions, because community means community, and there's a usual function in the community, you must realize too that it is a socializing help to them to still have access to their community, and it's actually therapeutic to the community to be a part of that healing. Because we begin to understand that we are all in this together. And it says in section 9, subject to the admission of the mental health facility by the order of the court in the interest of the person's health or the public safety, or to the volunteer or facilitated admission to the mental health facility, no person diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness shall be denied right to live in and to be a part of their community. So what this means is we have to also do the public education for us to understand this. And quite frankly, you know who are some of the most cruel human beings, the persons in this instance? Children. Because they think they're making a joke or teasing somebody. I think even in the Bible, there's a story of Elijah when the children was cursing Elijah, saying, "Go up with your bald head," and criticizing Elijah, and a curse is put upon them. Children can be very, very harsh, but children can be very, very understanding if you teach them how to understand and handle. They could be most loving and therapeutic. How to handle people under stress, how to handle grandma now that she's starting to go through Alzheimer's, how to handle grandpa as he have these bouts with schizophrenia, etc., etc. We need to be able to educate that, and we should have find a way to, even in school, to find a way to inculcate that into the minds and the heart of people. Now, Mr. Vice President, you can have all the candy all you want, but the thing with human nature is we don't often do what is expected. We tend to do a lot what is inspected. So in other words, unless there's a way to monitor and a way to penalize deviant behavior, you still leave it up just to the pure charitable soul of somebody. And quite frankly, I could appreciate somebody on a ward being very, very frustrated and angry, because we can get angry at times. But sometimes they need a rule to remind them, catch yourself, go take that lunch break, sip some coffee, calm down, and come back. Because that person has rights. And that infringement of that rights will lead to this on you. So it's just like the laws or the traffic light. Nobody wants to crash, but if the rules weren't there, more people would be running the traffic light. And I want to state this very, very clearly, because I think this is very, very important. And this section of the bill, section 68, where it says offenses against persons diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness, I think is very, very important. It caused me to reflect back on the incident that was publicized in the Rampling Home of Children, how the children were I can't even use the word discipline, was beaten. And I believe that matter went to adjudication. And we've seen in many occasions, like I said, we've seen it even sometimes in parents. And I want us to understand that children, not only adults or elderly persons suffer from mental breakdown, they are also children. Even those who actually are born with Alzheimer's, not Alzheimer's, with autism, et cetera, we find that across the board. I have seen, and it's also coming back to me, but even healthy young people had snapped under pressure. I remember knowing people who were found walking the road naked. Respectable, decent people. And just out of the blue, something happened. And I can remember that no less than 3 specific incidents. And let me stop for a minute there. I saw it because someone shared the video. When the video hits your phone, you don't share that. When somebody doing something else to destroy someone, we're not talking about in business. If you're in business and something is stolen, that's called theft. But when you're deliberately trying to undermine and destroy somebody's life and bring somebody down, we should not be sharing these kind of things and these contents. It reminds me of the young lady who had recently committed suicide, and her video keep playing in my mind, the torture and the pain she went through just to get $20. And how people treated her across the board, and how she felt ignored by police officers and everything else. Some people will say, oh, that wasn't mental illness, because they think mental illness is crazy. Mental illness is pressure that brings you to the point that causes you to operate outside of your norm. So many women are out there now selling their bodies to the point because of the pressure, the vicissitude of life had brought them to the point. I am dare to say publicly that some good women are selling their body. Oh, how that happened? Because you don't know what you would do as a father when you get to that real point of desperation where you have to do something to save your child when nobody else help you. And the only thing you could do as a woman is say, you know something? All I have is my body. And she bury her pride in a pocket somewhere, and she lay with somebody, a landlord or somebody, and you will look at her and you will call her bad, and you don't know that she had to put her pride down because all she could think about is where my children are going to lay their head. Sometimes we got to understand the pressure that people have to bear on them. And that causes a short psychological break. It may not be as graphic as you think. And then we see drugs, a drug addiction. I remember a friend who has a twin, boys, both experimented with drugs, and one had lost his mind. And it was what they call just marijuana. And they're struggling with that. But let me read into the hearing this thing, which I think is very important, and I want everyone to notice, because we expect, therefore, with the passage of this bill, that there is going to be a higher standard and duty of care towards anyone that is facilitated in the healthcare industry, not only just with the mental illness, but across the board, but in particularly mental illness, that you must realize that you will be held accountable for how you treat that individual. You can either be praised by your good service, or you can suffer this. And it says in 68, any person in charge of a health facility, a mental health facility, a medical practitioner, or other mental health professional, attendant, nurse, or other persons employed in a health facility or mental health facility who willfully mistreat or willfully neglects any person in that health or mental health facility commits an offense and is liable to summary conviction to a fine of $1,000 or imprisonment for 2 years or both. For such fine and imprisonment, and that we should applaud in this House, that we are ensuring that there is a penalty behind it.
Senator Rami, one moment. The time has expired, but I'll allow you a minute to wrap up.
And there's a penalty behind it. So my closing is this. Love our people. Treat them as you should treat yourselves. If not, the government will do what it needs to do by bringing and enacting law for the protection of those persons who the unloving individuals seek to abuse. And with that, and knowing that this document in all its appearance is holistic and thought out, I stand here and I support this bill. And I encourage this to be widely disseminated, not just posted on a government website somewhere, so people can understand that this, as related to mental healthness, and I would say it, is a new beginning.
As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michael Alcides.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in the wrap-up, I would just like to thank all senators for their contribution, and I could tell by the passion, sincerity, the testimonials spoken by the senators who contributed to this bill, that this matter of mental illness touches many of us, as indicated by the personal experiences that were related here today. Many causes of mental illness, Mr. Vice President: reaction to drugs, stresses brought on by finances and other issues, lost love. Sometimes we just don't know. And the tendency has been to, as has been said, ridicule, make light of the situation. And I think this provides us an opportunity to promote more education and understanding of mental illness so that we can truly move towards fulfilling the purpose of the bill. Of course, the objectives are lofty, Mr. Vice President, and resources will be required. We have to put our money where our mouth is. And that commitment is required, and that commitment, and this becomes a national priority, Mr. Vice President, when more and more voices are raised and joined in this course. As this becomes a national priority, then this commitment stands a much better chance of surviving, as we cross various administrations, because then it becomes a national priority of ours to protect those who are impacted by mental illness or the potential for mental illness. So once again, Mr. Vice President, I commit the bill to the Senate. I thank all senators for their contribution, and I move for a second reading and committal of the bill for an act to repeal the Mental Health Act and to make provision for the promotion, protection, and enforcement of the rights of persons diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness, the care and treatment of such persons, the establishment of a mental health services board, establishment of a mental health review tribunal, and for connected purposes. Mr. Vice President, I so move.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to repeal the Mental Health Act and to make provision for the promotion, protection, and enforcement of the rights of persons diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness, the care and treatment of such persons, the establishment of a mental health services board, the establishment of a mental health review tribunal, and for connected purposes. As many are in favor, say aye. Aye. Those who are opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to repeal the Mental Health Act and to make provision for the promotion, protection, and enforcement of the rights of persons diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness, the care and treatment of such persons, the establishment of a mental health services board, the establishment of a mental health review tribunal, and for connected purposes.
For the second reading of bills,
Mr. Vice President, I will now move for the suspension of the session until for the lunch suspension. For when we return, we intend to, following the luncheon suspension, we intend to debate second reading and committal of the disaster risk management bill. Because there were some motions made in the House of Assembly, we will ask to withdraw the bill that's on the table and replace it. Mr. Vice President, I move that the business of the Senate do suspend until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the business of this Senate be suspended to 3 o'clock p.m. As many are in favor, say aye. Those who oppose, say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. The business of this House stands suspended until 3 p.m.